Hello friends, welcome to Universe of Naruto X. If you love Naruto what if stories and anime explanations, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin today's story. Silence dominated the battlefield as Nar stood defiantly against a stunned Zabuza. Not only had he destroyed his Mizu Bunchan without trouble, but after that cloud of smoke dispersed, he was different than before. Before he was a blank-faced, navy-eyed brat, but now he had electric blue eyes, a giant sword that he swore he knew from somewhere, and a predatory smile on his face, though he was still a brat. Though, that wasn't what caused Zabuza to break a sweat. What did was the aura of sheer confidence and dominance that he now emitted. Anko was in complete shock at the changes in her student. The blank-faced boy she had gotten fond of had now a completely different personality. His presence reminded her of someone, but she couldn't think of who it was. But she did know one thing. For some reason, she had strange feeling of confidence in him and knew that he'd be able to get them out of this mess. Though it could be because he was holding a sword that was bigger than he was. Suna was in awe of the boy that stood in front of him. From what he had seen before with the demon brothers, he was dependable, being able to deal with one of them easily. But now he had the sneaking suspicion that he would even be able to take on Zabuza and actually win as crazy as it seemed. He could only hope that his suspicions were true, as if they weren't, they'd be as good as dead. Satsuki had her jaw gaping at the scene, the dead last of the academy. Her stupid teammate and the same guy who she had been working with for the past month had completely changed the personality that she had grown used to seeing. Standing before her wasn't a blank-faced blonde, but a blonde who gave off a powerful aura. She didn't know why, but she actually believed that he could beat Zabuza. Yakumo couldn't believe her eyes what had happened to her blonde teammate. He was always so calm and collected, but now it seemed like he was ready to run wild. She had never felt such confidence from anyone in her life, and that made her feel safe and secure. She knew that deep in her heart, Naruto would beat Zabuza and save them all from the situation that they found themselves in. However, the standoff was broken when Zabuza knew that this was no time to be thinking about what ifs of the brat. Quickly making more clones, he sent them to get rid of him before he could do anything else. Seeing Zabuza create more clones and send them to attack, Naruto quickly lost his smile and his eyes narrowed as he rushed in to intercept them before they reached shore. To everyone's complete shock, he started running across the water similar to Zabuza's clones, reaching the first one before they reached land. The clone responded with a downward slash, which Nar avoided, taking a step to the right and spinning, using the momentum gained to slash through the clone Kubiryo and its wielder with ease. Not easing up, he rushed through the remaining clones, hacking and dodging his way through them before he finally finished dealing with them, turning his attention towards the original. Anko, Zabuza wasn't just surprised, he was outright stunned. A boy at least half his age was using a sword that huge with such grace and skill, it just wasn't possible. But at the same time, a feeling that he thought had died long ago began to surface after almost a decade. For the first time in a number of years, Zabuza actually felt excited at the prospect of fighting another person. He was broken out of his thoughts when Naruto started to run towards him, his sword trailing behind in his right hand. Tisk. Looks like I don't have a choice. Zabuza whispered, removing his hand from his swirl nojutsu. He grabbed Kubiko and charged Naro, leaving Anko to drop back into the water and take large gulps of precious air. Seeing Zabuza release his sensei, Naruto mentally breathed a sigh of relief. That was one problem dealt with, and the other was headed right towards him. Tightening his grip on his bozu stood, he swung and met Zabuza's Kubiko head-on. A deafening clang and shower of sparks flying as the two blades met each other. Grunting as he was being easily overpowered by the larger man, Naruto shifted his sword slightly and managed to throw Kubiko slightly off balance. Sidestepping, Naruto spun around and slashed horizontally in an attempt to at least break Zabuza's guard a little bit. Feeling his balance shift slightly due to the brat angling his sword slightly, saw him spin around like he did earlier, probably trying to break through Kubiko like with the clone. Smirking under his bandages, he had to admit that if he was using a regular sword, that would have worked. But unfortunately for the brat, he had Kubiryo. Tightening his grip on his sword and bracing himself for the attack, Zabuza took the full brunt of Naruto's swing. His arms buckled a little bit from the power of it, but it didn't even come close to the power of Kisami's monstrous swings. Naruto's eyes went wide. He had at least expected Zabuza to take a step back or something, but he didn't expect him to shrug off his swing like it was nothing. His momentary distraction was exploited as Zabuza kicked him in the gut, making him stumble back a few feet before his roll to the side to avoid the overhead swing from Zabuza. Righting himself, Naruto was about to rush towards Zabuza again when he noticed his sensei running towards them. Her hands a blur as she prepared a jutsu. Satsuki and Yakuma were also preparing their own jutsu as they ran towards the shoreline of the lake and took aim. Zabuza noticed as well if the tensing of his body and darkening of his eyes were any indication. Tisk figured he wouldn't be fighting fair. I almost forgot that we're not just swordsmen. We're also shinobi and we don't fight fair. Just when he was starting to get into this duel, he remembered that they weren't just swordsmen, but were ninja as well. One-on-one and honor didn't exist in this world. Figured the brat was just stalling for time for his team to get the jump on him. But he didn't expect what happened next, and neither did anyone else. Enko-sensei, Satsuki, Yukumo, stop. Nar shouted at his team, making them flinch and stop in the midst of their seals. What do you mean stop? You're seriously not expecting me to just wait and do nothing while he butchers you? We've got the advantage now, and I'm not going to let it go to waste. Enko shouted back. The hell was he thinking? They had the advantage now that it was Twin 1, especially now that she wasn't going to underestimate him anymore. Yeah, you idiot. You think you can take on someone like him on your own? Are you insane? Satsuki screamed at him, her eyes burning in anger. We're not going to let you get killed just because you think you're going to win. Naruto, we're a team. We fight together. That's why we're not going to just sit back and watch. Yukumo yelled at him, her usually calm face now slightly angry and determined. But the words from their teammate that followed made everyone present. Gawk, that's true, and if we were fighting other ninja, I'd agree with you. But that's not the situation anymore. This turned into a duel between swordsmen the moment his sword met mine. Have you guys noticed that he hasn't used a single Mizu Bunshin or Suiden Jutsu even though I'm on the water? His playing field. He could have crushed me if he decided to use a wide-scale jutsu, but he didn't. He probably did it unconsciously, but he has agreed this duel as well. Isn't that right, Zabuza-san? Naruto said, never taking his eyes off Zabuza as he tightened the grip on his sword. Again, this brat had him stunned. Was he suicidal or just plain insane? A duel with him, one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, though he had to admit he gained a very tiny grain of respect for the brat. Not many still upheld the honor that came with a duel anymore, himself included. But he had to admit, he actually kind of wanted to see what the brat was made of. If he knew about the honor and code of a duel, what were his skills like? From what he's seen, he wasn't too green. Finally, he did something that unnerved everyone there. He laughed. It wasn't the condescending or dark laugh from earlier, but an actual humor-filled one. Are you insane or just plain suicidal brat? You're openly challenging one of the strongest 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. Even with your sensei, you two wouldn't even land a scratch me. Zabuza barked out, his eyes never leaving the blonde in front of him, as he also tightened his grip on Kubiko. What came next out of Naruto's mouth was something that he just couldn't forgive. Don't you mean former 7 ninja swordsman of the mist, old man? From what I've seen, you've lost your skill as a swordsman. Guess laying around doing nothing for a few years will do that to you. Naruto snidely said, sneering at Zabuza as tick marks began to pop up on his head. Oh, you're dead, brat. And for the record, I'm not that old. I'm only 26, Zabuza yelled, rage boiling in his eyes as he charged at Naruto. Naruto winced as his plan to anger Zabuza worked probably too well, bringing his Basudodo up to block the blow from Zabuza as a shower of spark rained down on him. His arms buckled under the sheer power of Zabuza's swing as he made a mental note to himself. Note to self, try not to anger a former master swordsman during a duel by commenting on their age. They continued clashing against each other, sparks flying each time their blades met. As he saw a diagonal slash from Zabuza, Naruto misjudged the timing of his dodge. Zabuza landing a clean cut on his shoulder. The favor was returned when they collided once more. Naruto angling and pushing his Basudodo off against Kubikir, managing to land a cut on Zabuza's cheek. Eventually, Naruto started to slow down. The heavy blows from Zabuza making his arms go more and more numb with each swing. Swinging his sword in overhead in a wide arc, Zabuza's Kubiri Bocho met Naruto's Basudodo with a loud clang and explosion of sparks. Angling his sword again, then pushing against Kubikiribio once more. Naruto threw Zabuza off balance slightly as he swung towards him, but midair as Zabuza ducked under his swing. Spinning around, Zabuza swung horizontally to bisect Nar, but hit his sword instead, sending the blonde flying a short distance from the power of his swing. Smirking a bit, Zabuza changed his stance as Naruto staggered to his feet, setting up an unstable guard with his Basudodo, setting his feet diagonally shoulder-length apart, his right foot outstretched, and Kubir Bocho held in a reverse grip perpendicular to his body behind him. Zabuza performed a move he hasn't used since his time as a part of Kiri's military force. Kubiki Bocho Raiswari Naruto barely saw him move as Zabuza appeared behind him, sending him flying from the monstrous power of his attack. Hitting the water and skipping a few feet, he managed to regain his balance and right himself in the air. His eyes widened as he saw the after effect of Zabuza's attack. A scar in the water ran from where Zabuza stood to where he was before his attack, at least 7 to 9 ft long, a foot wide, and 2 feet deep. Not bad, brat. You're actually still alive. I must be getting rusty if you lived through that. Nobody's seen that and lived to admire it like you're doing right now. Zabuza praised slightly, though he was discontent with the lack of power in his attack. He was rusty and he didn't like that. Nar stood up shakily, his stamina beginning to run out. He was covered in cuts, the largest one on being on the back of his right shoulder from misreading the timing of one of his dodges. Compared to him, Zabuza had only superficial cuts, his most major one being on a small cut on his cheek from getting knocked off balance earlier. Shooting a quick glance to the side, Nar could tell his teammates and Sensei's self-control were quickly slipping from the glares they were directing at Zabuza. He needed to finish this quickly before they interrupted them, slipping into a stance similar to Zabuza's before. He got a raised eyebrow from the taller man. Looks like you're intending on finishing this, huh? Fine, brat. I'll humor you, he said, getting into the same stance as before. We end things in this final attack. All right, Zabuza-san. I win. You let us go. You win. You can kill me, but please let my team and Tuna-san go. Naruto said, staring straight at Zabuza, his eyes hard and narrowed. You really think you should be bargaining in your position? I'll think about it, but you have zero chance of winning, brat. Zabuza replied, tightening his grip on his sword as he narrowed and focused his eyes on Nar. Silence reigned over the lake as no one dared to take a breath during the tense moment. Finally, as if they were waiting for it, a leaf dropped onto the lake and the two charged each other. Kyubi Karibio, Raiswari, Basuto, Jishanjiri. Faster than their eyes could follow, excluding Anko. The final strikes of Naruto and Zabuza ended. The water between them ripped 3 feet across, 5 feet deep, and 12 feet long, slowly began to fill back in, causing turbulent waves to form. Naruto's eyes widened as he coughed up blood as a cut appeared from his left shoulder going diagonally downwards, ending near his hip, dropping his boss dodo. It disappeared in a large wisp of black smoke before hitting the water. His world started to go black as he saw Anko sprinting towards him. He managed to mutter one word before losing consciousness. How? Zabuza stood firm before he coughed up some blood, staining the bandages over his mouth. If he turned around, they all would see that he had a horizontal gash across his body. The deepest cut was on his right bicep, which was cut halfway to the bone, which ran across his chest to the other bicep. Smirking to himself, he heaved Kubir Bocho onto his shoulder with his left hand before he started to sway. Though before he could fall, a masked figure in a kimono appeared next to him and leaned him onto their shoulder. Without waiting for a response from any of them, he vanished in a swirl of mist. After Inko brought Naruto back to the shore of the lake, she was met with a teary-eyed Yukumo and Satsuki, who asked if he was all right. To everyone's relief, the cut he received wasn't life-threatening. The deepest part being near his shoulder was halfway towards cutting the bone, which Anko took care of quickly. Scene change. Unknown place. The masked figure that had Zabuza held close gently put him down as they started tending to his injuries. After a few seconds, Zabuza snapped his eyes open, locking his gaze on the person treating him. Haku, that you? He asked, slightly disorientated from the blood loss. Yes, Zabuza-sama, it's me. I'm sorry that I let you get this injured. I should have stopped that shinobi when I had the chance, Haku solemnly said in a feminine tone, removing the mask on their face to reveal a beautiful yet sad face. She expected to get yelled at for failing to protect him, but she got yelled at for a completely different reason. Are you an idiot? That was a one-on-one duel between that brat and me. If you had interfered, I would have cut you down for tarnishing my name as a swordsman. I don't have much left, but that brat reminded me that I still do have my reputation as a swordsman, he said in a stern tone as he started checking over his injuries, being actually surprised at the damage that he sustained. Damn, that brat wasn't half bad. If I had been a little slower, I would have lost my arm. Guess he wasn't bluffing when he said he was different from the other brats. He was broken out of his assessment by Haku, who reminded him to be careful. Zabuza-sama, please don't strain yourself. Next time, I'll take care of that boy. You focus on recovering your strength. God said that in the case that we failed to eliminate the target, we'll gather and eliminate them within the coming week or two. Haku said, but once again was surprised by her master's words. You don't get it, do you, Haku? That brat is mine and mine alone. You take care of his sensei and those other BRS, but me and him have a duel to finish next time. Well, give them until the day that Slebel decides to attack to recover. After hearing her master's orders, Haku nodded and returned to tending his wounds as Zabuza thought back to duel. That kid, he's good. He's really good. The only reason it turned out like this was because he's inexperienced and I'm rusty. Hey, he's going to be a monster in the future. Time skip. 2 hours later. Scene change. Nami no Kuni. After their brush with death, the group finally made it to Suna's house. As they approached the house, a relatively young woman with dark hair stepped out of the house. And as soon as she turned her head and saw the group, namely Tazuna, she started to tear up before running and giving the man a hug. Father, you're all right. I was so worried. You said it would only take 2 days to come back. Why did it take you 3? Are you hurt anywhere? The woman asked, frantically, checking if Tazuna was injured anywhere. She received a chuckle in return as he hugged his daughter back. I'm fine, Tsunami. I was attacked, but these brave ninja protected me. Tuna reassured his daughter as she turned and introduced herself and thanked them for protecting her father. I'm Tsunami. Thank you so much for protecting my father. Without him, the last hope for the wave would be lost. Tsunami said solemnly, knowing that his daughter would venture into more depressing memories. Suna opted to break the now saddened mood. Now, Tsunami, just don't stand there. We have guests to our home. Let's try and make them feel welcomed. Okay. Tuna said with a bright smile on his face that was returned by his daughter. You're right, father. Everyone, please do come right in. It's small, but it is home. We should have enough room for all of you to stay, so please don't be shy, Tsunami said with a smile as she led the group into the house. As they entered, they spotted a child with spiky black hair and eyes. Seeing them enter, the child gave them a slightly angry look before Tsunami called out to him. Inari, say hello to these people. They are ninja who protected Grandpa. Tsunami said with a gently and motherly tone as she smiled at her son. Though Inari ignored them as he headed up to his room. Seeing the reaction of the kid raised alarms in Enko's head. A kid his age shouldn't be looking like that. Something big must have happened with him. Quickly glancing around, she also noted that there weren't many pictures of Tsunami with someone who looked like her husband. Mentally, she made a note to herself about that. Well, looks like the situation is more drastic than we thought. Kid must have had his dad either leave them or got killed by God's men, she assessed as Tsunami apologized for her son's behavior, getting an understanding nod from the Konohan ninja, seeing as the situation in Nami no Kuni must have been harsh. Time skip 1 hour later. After they had all settled into Tsunami, Suna, and Inari's home, Team 12 had one thing on their minds, that being Naruto. After Anko had finished treating him and Tsunami directed her as to where he was going to be sleeping, she had called Yukumo and Satsuki together for a team meeting. Anko-sensei, just what is Nar? Yukumo asked timidly. After being shouted at by her teammate to not interfere with the battle he had with Zabuza and seeing him somehow hold his own against him, hundreds of questions swam through her mind. Who really was their blonde teammate? The blank-faced but funny person they always saw. The angry and scary person who promised to kill Gato, the strong and confident person who fought against Zabuza. Just who was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze? Ya-sensei, how was he able to fight one-on-one with Zabuza? He's never shown that kind of power, not ever. Satsuki also questioned. Part of her felt afraid that there was someone strong like him so close to her. Unlike Anko, who Satsuki knew was loyal to and loved the village, she knew that Naro didn't really have any friends at all in the entire village. He didn't have a reason to save or even care about her other than the obligation of being on the same team. But another part of her was relieved that her teammate was so strong. Maybe he could help her become stronger, too. Seeing the looks on her Gen's faces, Enko made a muddled face as she admitted that she didn't know much about the blonde, either. You guess is as good as mine. You too, from what I've noticed in the past month, he doesn't really have any friends in the village. I guess we can count since we kind of hang out and stuff, but other than that, nada. He also doesn't seem to really try during training sessions. We've all seen that. But today, I don't know why, but he was really fired up to fight against Zabuza. It's even more surprising that he managed to actually fight him one-on-one for a little bit, Enko said, explaining what she's noticed so far. But she got confused looks from the students near the last part of her explanation. For a little bit, Enko-sensei. But didn't it end in a draw? Yukumo asked confused as she saw both of them look like they were about to drop Nar actually doing that. Satsuki shared her teammate's inquiry. She thought it ended in a draw, too. Trust me, you too, if that battle had dragged on, Naruto would have lost. And I do mean he managed to match him for a little bit. At the start of the battle, he was being underestimated by Zabuza, which is understandable coming from his position. But as soon as they started clashing, Zabuza started to get sharper in his movements. Completely different from how he fought against Mia Naruto earlier. That means that during the fight, he was removing the rust that had probably built up over the past few years, was living as a nuke. Naruto, on the other hand, started to react a little bit faster each time, but Zabuza was recovering more of his old skills as a swordsman much quicker than Naruto was polishing his. That's why I said he managed to match him for a little bit. Enko explained to her students, seeing the looks of fear on their faces, she couldn't help but put her hands on the top of their heads and ruffle their hair. Don't worry, you two. Next time, I'll take him on. I underestimated him like in Rookie. The first time because I thought his skills diminished over the years, which they didn't. Next time I'll go all out. Enko reassured her students, which worked, seeing the relieved looks and smiles on their faces. Now enough questions about him. He saved us, didn't he? Why don't we go check on our favorite blondie? She said, standing up and heading to his room with Satsuki and Yukumo in tow. As they opened the door, they were met with a shirtless Naruto in the process of taking off his pants. They all froze, staring at each other. Satsuki's mind overloaded at the scene. She started stuttering and pointed at him as her mind tried to process the situation at hand. Her eyes turned into swirls as her face turned a vibrant red that put a tomato to shame. Her mind furiously imprinting the image of her teammate to her memory against her will. Yukumo didn't fare any better. Her eyes were as wide as saucers as she stared at the scene. She tried to speak, opening and closing her mouth in an attempt to say anything. Her face a similar vibrant red to Satsuki's. Her mind shut down at the image of her half-teammate, which unknown to her was being burned to her memory. Enko just stared, being the oldest of the bunch, and having seen the male anatomy, she didn't really react at all, though there was a very slight tinge of pink on her cheeks. The slightly erotic moment was immediately broken when Naruto removed his hands from his pants and walked to the door, his face blank. As he reached it, his face was still blank, but his cheeks gained a light dusting of pink as he said one word before slamming the door in their faces. Perverts. Dinner that night was a silent and awkward affair. The days following Team 12 and Tuna's return to his home were relatively tranquil, minus the incident the first night back. During that period, Naruto managed to recover enough from his injury to do some very light training thanks to Enko's medical knowledge, which him and his team found out about a few days ago when she was tending to him. Flashback 2 days ago, start there. That should take care of any of the lasting pain. Anything else feel tight? Enko asked, scanning Naruto with her chosen jutsu to check for any injuries that she missed. Ah, no. I'm fine now. Thank you. Enko-sensei Nar replied, slowly rotating his shoulder to see if there was any pain in it. Seeing her student start moving something she just finished healing's eyebrow twitched before she hit him on the head. You idiot, don't just start moving right away. Let your injuries settle down for at least an hour. Her fist and the bump on Naruto's head smoking while Yukumo and Satsuki laughed wryly. After the whole ordeal, Yukumo turned to and asked her how she knew Irian Enjutsu. Enko-sensei, how do you know Irian Enjutsu? I've never heard of anyone outside of the hospital and medical team that know it. As Satsuki and Naruto also looked at her with curious gazes, seeing the looks of her students, she gave them a small smile and told them the reason. Well, Tsunade-sama has always pushed for a regime that made medical ninja a permanent addition to squads to reduce the rate of casualties by having support in the event a member gets injured. Of course, Minato-sama also agreed, but was overruled by the council, saying that they couldn't afford to risk medical ninja being casualties themselves since they're such a valuable resource to the village. But after that time, Tsunade-sama herself offered to teach those who were willing to learn. At first, being an Ambu captain at that time, I wasn't interested at all. But then Orochimaru-sama told me that a captain wasn't just the strongest, fastest, or most knowledgeable. They were the ones who were responsible for making sure that their team made it out in one piece. At first, I was skeptical, so I didn't take it completely to heart. The next mission after that, I lost my entire squad to an ambush set up by the same nuke nin we were hunting down. If I had taken up Tsunade-sama's training, I would have been able to save at least one of them. But in the end, I failed them and they all died. After I retired from the Ambu and asked Sama for her training, which she said I mastered to the level of a head medic, which really surprised me and her since it only took a year. And well, that's where I am now. I learned it so that I don't lose anyone to my own powerlessness ever again. And I'm glad that I did. After finishing her story, she was met with the teary eyes of her genin, which unnerved her greatly as they threw praises at her the rest of the night to her embarrassment. Flashback end. After that, Naruto was peppered with questions about the skills he showcased when he faced Zabuza a week ago. However, they all got the same response when they asked him, including Anko. The situation was serious. After trying to get a different answer, they all eventually gave up. Naruto wasn't going to tell them and they didn't want to pry any more than they already have. After things settled down, they learned of the situation of the wave from Suna and Tsunami that after God had taken control of it, its people had begun living in fear and poverty because of the tyrant. Things weren't that kind to the family either, as they learned that Tsunami's husband, Kaisa, was tortured before they publicly executed him in the view of the entire village. That was what led to Inari's stark personality change from an optimistic and smiling boy to the pessimistic and perpetually frowning boy that they've seen. Things seemed tense for a while when Inari snapped at the Konoha ninja and his family yesterday, saying that they had no chance against God. Nar had scared the boy when he became angry before he left the house, returning in a slightly better mood the next day to the surprise of the group. Flashback yesterday. Why do you guys bother to try so hard? No matter how hard you train, you're still no match for God's men. No matter what glorious claims you make or how hard you work, the weak will only end up getting killed. Inari shouted at the group during dinner, his eyes burning with hatred looking at the Konoha ninja gathered around the dinner table. Hearing Inari's words, Anko quickly lost the grin on her face. Satsuki stared intently at him. Yukumo's mouth thinned into a small line. But immediately, the atmosphere turned tense when Naruto slowly stood up and looked at the boy, matching his glare with an icy gaze. Why do we bother trying so hard? No matter what we do, we're going to get killed by God's men. Are you an idiot? Nar whispered in a cold tone, his icy gaze intensifying with every second passing. Everyone was unable to speak. Never had any of them seen the blonde act like this. Inari was able to find his voice to retort, though it was in a shaky tone. I told you that it's hopeless. Kaisa was my hero. H told me that heroes exist and that you would be able to follow your dreams if you worked hard enough. But he died. God killed him. He was the hero of the wave, the person I dreamed of being. If God killed him, you guys aren't going to be able to beat him. Inari was sniffling now, rubbing his eyes as tears made their way down his cheeks. The situation remained tense and increased even more when Naruto pulled out his bozu and held it next to him. You see this? This isn't just a sword. This is a symbol of my dreams and my honor passed down to me from someone I held close to my heart. So what if it seems hopeless? No matter what happens, you should never give up. You say that dreams and heroes don't exist. Then embrace your dreams and become one. If you want to be a hero, you need to have dreams. Naruto said, his icy gaze warming up slightly as he finished his monologue. Taking his sword, he made his way to the door, stopping before he addressed Inari once more before he left. I'm no hero, nor will I ever be one, but I've embraced my dreams. If someone like me did it, then you can do it, too. As the door closed with a soft click, Inari looked down at his hands, mulling over the words that the blonde said to him. Embrace your dreams. If you want to be a hero, you need to have dreams. Embrace my dreams. While Inari looked at his hands, the others, namely his team, looked at the door where he left having the same thought running through their heads. Nar seen change unknown part of the forest. After his little explosive monologue at the house, Naruto needed to get some fresh air, he still didn't know why he blew up and said such things. Seeing as he wouldn't be going back anytime soon, he decided to train through the night, honing his kenjutsu in preparation for his rematch with Zabuza. Eventually, after a few hours of training, his body still recovering, he leaned against a tree and let sleep take over. Morning soon came with it a beautiful raven-haired girl in a pink kimono picking herbs. Haku was getting the remaining ingredients for a painkiller that she was making for Zabuza. Sighing at the attitude of her master for the past few days he was complaining about blonde BRZ and weak-ass kenjutsu skills. She finally had decided to get some fresh air and leave their temporary hideout. As she hummed a happy tune and foraged for what she was looking for, she froze when she saw him, the same blonde that had caused such damage to her master a few days earlier. She contemplated killing him here and now. From what she had seen, he was much more of a threat if he was able to get Zabuza-sama this riled up. Slowly reaching out for his neck, she was surprised when she got her wrist grabbed by the still sleeping shinobi. Panicking slightly, Haku was about to pry off his hand when she saw his eyes opened. Captivated by those dark navy blue eyes, Haku momentarily forgot about the situation that she was in until it was broken by the blonde. Mind telling me what you're trying to do? He asked, his face blank, though his eyes seemed to stare into her soul. It looked like you fell asleep there. It's very cold out here in the forest, you know. I was going to wake you up, but you grabbed me instead. she said in a gentle tone, a smile on her face. As she said that, she felt the grip he had on her wrist vanish. My apologies. I'm a little on edge right now. Forgive my rudeness, Naruto said, getting up and bowing slightly, much to Hiku's embarrassment. It's no problem. Please don't bow to me. I'm not someone who deserves to be bowed at. She replied in a slightly panicky tone, obliviously not used to being apologized to. After the two introduced themselves, Naruto had offered to help Hiku find the herbs that she was looking for, much to her surprise, though she accepted. As the two worked together, Hiku couldn't help but feel the need to talk to the blonde, though she knew it wasn't a smart move. Naruto-san, may I ask why you were training so hard? She asked, curiosity clearly in her voice. Turning to her, Naruto answered her question to her surprise, not expecting him to answer a stranger's question. I have the dreams and the honor of someone close to me riding on my shoulders. I need to get stronger so that in the future I'll be able to stand next to him as his equal. He said with such passion that Hiku blushed slightly. They must be someone very precious to you. Hiku said in a quiet tone of voice as she looked down. Looking up, she was met with a small smile that had her heart racing for a little bit, a blush on her face from seeing the handsome blonde. Yeah, they were very precious to me, Naruto said with a faraway look in his eyes. Finishing up, Naruto stood next to Hiku as he handed her the rest of the herbs that she needed. As they were about to part ways, Naruto called out to her. Hiku-san, Zabuza-san regards. I'm expecting him to be ready for our rematch soon. As the words left his mouth, she nearly dropped her basket, pulling out a handful of sunbon as she questioned him. You knew. If you knew, then why did you help me? She shouted in disbelief that he would actively and knowingly help his enemy. But the answer she got wasn't what she expected. Because I feel like you're similar to me. We both have someone who's precious to us, and will do anything to make sure that they're happy. And also, I don't want a handicap duel because he's still injured, he said, walking away back to Suna's house, leaving a speechless Hiku behind. Staring at the back of the blonde, Hiku couldn't remove the light fluttery feeling in her heart that she felt from the blonde's words. Giggling softly to herself, she didn't know it herself, but she headed back to the hideout in a happier mood than when she left. When Nar got back to the house, he was once again interrogated by Enko about his little outburst and where he went during the night, getting the same blank-faced reply of, it was nothing important before giving up and letting him off the hook. Flashback end. Time skip 5 days later. As the days came and went, Team 12 beginning their training as Suna said the bridge would be complete by the end of next week, giving them one final week to prepare for Zabuza's inevitable return. During that time period, Enko had noticed that her genin had began to change slightly as they saw more and more of the situation of Nami Nukuni. After he was evaluated to be fit for duty by Enko, Naruto now walked around with the same giant sword they had seen him use strapped to his back. He was also training much more seriously than they had seen, doing exercises that made Enko cringe like balancing on the tip of his sword using his fingertips. She had also noticed that he was beginning to open up very slightly when around them, seeing a very small smile appear and disappear on his face. Satsuki was training like there was no tomorrow. She had asked Enko for instruction on Irian Enjutsu, chakra control exercises, and surprisingly Suiden Jutsu, not the typical Kaden Jutsu that the Uchiha used. After prodding from both Enko and Yukumo, she eventually told them the reason why. Flashback 2 days ago. So Satsuki, are you going to tell us why you're not asking for any Kaden Jutsu? I have a whole bunch that I can teach you. You know, Enko said, her arms crossed over her chest as she smiled at Satsuki in a teasing manner. Ya Satsuki, doesn't the Uchiha clan specialize in Kadenjutsu? Suiden Jutsu is the complete opposite. Not that it's uncommon to use both. Yukumo asked, tilting her head in confusion. Fine already. I have a natural disposition to Suiden Jutsu, and I can't really use Kaden Jutsu because of that. I got it from my mom, Satsuki said. Her face red with embarrassment. An Uchiha who couldn't use Kaden Jutsu wasn't an Uchiha at all. Unlike her other clan members, her mother and herself had a Suiden-based chakra affinities which made it difficult for them to use Kaden-based jutsu because they were natural opposites. That's all. You know, that's not something that you should really be feeling down about. You know, Enko said in a gentle tone as she ruffled the hair of her student, much to her embarrassment. I have the same problem as you, Satsuki. My clan specialized in Kadenjutsu, but my father, mother, and I all have Suiden-based chakra affinity. It really makes it hard to use Kaden Jutsu. I know. Yukumo told her friend, who looked surprised at her statement. As Satsuki smiled slightly, knowing that they didn't think any less of her, they turned their attention to the last member of their team. Nar, feeling their stares, looked up from sharpening his sword and stared right back at them. So, what about you, Naruto? Do you know your elemental affinity? Anko asked the question on everyone's mind, but the answer that they got back shocked them all. I'm Futon, Raiden, and Kaden-based, he said before turning back and sharpening his blade, ignoring the looks of shock on his team's faces. Flashback. And after the small moment of team bonding, Anko had given Satsuki a few scrolls on some Suiden and Irian Enjutsu. Yukuma was similar to Satsuki, asking Anko for the same things, knowledge on Suiden and Irian Enjutsu. She also noticed that she would always accompany Tsunami when she would go shopping. And when she returned, she had a very sullen look on her face, most likely from seeing the situation firsthand. As the end of the week neared, a very dire situation that involved Team 12 happened, one that caused them to see a much darker side of one of its members. Yukumo, Satsuki, and Naruto were all walking through the worn-down roads of Nami Nunkuni, getting groceries for Tsunami to make dinner. They all offered when Tsunami had twisted her ankle earlier in the day after slipping in the kitchen. As they were about to head back, they heard the sound of muffled screaming and immediately went to investigate. What they found was a group of thuggish men taking a girl around their age into a worn-own building. Seeing that scene, rage burned in their eyes. Making their way stealthily inside, they overheard them speak. And the more they spoke, the more their rage built up. So you guys found a fresh one. A tall and brutish-looking man said, admiring the new piece of merchandise that was brought in. He sure did, boss. God will pay quite the price for this one, I bet. Probably been hiding all this time, but we saw her walking alone a few minutes ago. A tall and skinny L-looking man sneered, his eyes trailing the body of their new catch. Hey boss, why don't we check if she's fresh? After all, don't want to give God something used right. A short and fat man said, wiping the drool off his lips. Fine, but just don't break her, the brutish man said, walking into the back of the building as the other men started to approach the bound girl. Unable to hold herself back anymore, Satsuki was about to lunge at them, but was stopped by Nar. She was about to punch him and then save that girl, but as she her fist back, she saw something that made her very soul shiver. His eyes were the same reptilian and electric blue that he had when he faced Zabuza. Yakuma was about to drop down and take care of those men until she felt a hand on her shoulder. She was about to slap it off and return to her plan until she turned slightly and saw the absolutely terrifying glow of her teammates' eyes. As she was about to speak, he spoke to both of them. Satsuki Yukumo, take them down. With that, he dropped down, his eyes cold and unforgiving as he landed, smashing his fist into the ground, causing a small tremor to resonate in the building. As Satsuki and Yukumo landed next to him, their eyes cold and unforgiving as well. Without a word, they charged the group of men as they were still in shock. Satsuki lashed out with a vicious kick to the leg of the skinny man, getting a snap from the force of her body weight and the momentum she had built up. Without waiting, she swung her elbow and caught him on the side of the head as he stumbled over. Spinning around once again, she hit him in the head, sending his head flying into the ground with an audible crack. Yukumo's fist caught the portly man in the face, breaking his nose as he re-wheeled back, about to cry out in agony. Without hesitation, she spun on her foot and gave him a kick to temple as he started to drop to the ground unconscious. Quickly dropping her foot, her heel accelerated and smashed his face into the ground with a crack echoing. As they finished up, Naro had picked up the girl that they had kidnapped. The terror in her eyes ignited something inside of him. Silently, he turned to face the remaining group of men. From 9 to 7, they stood with their backs to the wall, weapons drawn. Before any of Team 12 could act, their leader ran out of the back room, his eyes lit with fury. What the? He shouted as he frantically scanned the room, his eyes settling on the group of kids holding onto his property. Rage started to fill his veins as he immediately shouted at his men as he walked closer to them. You waiting around for their just kids? Kill them already. But a thought rang in his mind as he saw Satsuki and Yukumo as a twisted smile came to his face. Never mind that. Kill the boy, but don't be too rough on those girls. They'll definitely be worth a lot. Hearing his words, Satsuki and Yukumo felt a shiver run up their spines from the lurid look that they were getting from the man, making them feel sick to their stomach. Before they could retort, Naruto turned slightly to face them and stretched his arms with the girl out towards them. Take her and get out of here. I'll meet you two back at Tuna-san's home. He said quietly as they were about to retort. They saw his eyes and immediately all anger was replaced with fear. His eyes weren't the same electric blue but were now a dark crimson. Handing the girl to Satsuki broke the two out of their spell as he turned around and spoke to them once more, his voice carrying a much darker tone than before. Now with that, they quickly exited the building. Something inside of their hearts screamed at them that he was dangerous and to get as far away from him as possible. With his teammates gone, Nar stared at the group of men in front of him. Some of them cowered slightly, but for the most part, all of them just gave him smiles. One of the men, a tall fat one, approached him with the same grin on his face as he told Nar of his situation. You just sealed your own death, kid. After we're done with you, those girls are next. But don't you worry, we'll take real good Karwolf. But before he could finish, Naruto had buried a fist into his stomach, making the man bend over, clutching his gut. Removing his fist, he lashed out and rammed his left hand into his mouth, his thumb hooked into his chin. Before the man could react, with a sickening crunch and squelch, Naruto ripped the man's bottom jaw off. Unbridled horror was the only way to describe the scene that they had just witnessed. A few of them vomited at the scene. They had seen Jubo get his lower jaw ripped off by this kid. Know this monster. As Jubo frantically grabbed at where his jaw had been, making horrifying, unintelligible sounds of agony. Naruto dropped his jaw on the ground before lightning erupted from his right hand. As his hand shot towards and grabbed Jubo's head, Naruto whispered the name of his technique. Raiden Ginri. As his hand connected, a flash of light blinded the group and roar of thunder caused them to lose their hearing and vision, momentarily. What they saw next caused them to drop to the floor as fear filled their hearts. Naruto was holding the emaciated and smoking remains of Jubo. As he dropped the corpse, it disintegrated upon hitting the floor of the building into a pile of ash. Looking at them with the same crimson eyes, he said something that made their blood freeze as he started walking towards them. None of you are leaving here alive. The screams that followed were quickly silenced, being replaced with the sounds of throats being crushed, bone snapping, muscle being shredded, and blood being spilled. The tall, brutish man before was the only left of his group, backed into the corner of the building as he sobbed and shook uncontrollably. His eyes were wide and unfocused with unbridled terror as Nar slowly made his way over to him, covered in the blood of his men. Seeing the blonde, he started pleading for his life. Please, please don't kill me. I didn't want to be a part of any of this. God made me do this. I swear. I beg of you. Please spare me. I'll tell you everything. I promise I'll change. Just let me go. Sazu sobbed as he got on his knees to beg. His head was forced to look up by a hand, and his terrified brown eyes met burning crimson as he paled from the words that left the blonde's mouth. You're going to tell me no matter what, Naruto replied. His hand that was holding Sazu's head started to emit a blackish crimson smoke. Miryuden Zenrei Kuakorisu, Naruto whispered as the smoke condensed into a blackish crimson aura as the Sazu started screaming, feeling like his very being was being ripped away from his body. Never before had he felt such excruciating pain. Or rather, he wished for the sweet feeling of pain than this hell on earth he was being subjected to. Suddenly, Nar yanked his hand back, ripping out Sazu's soul as his body crumpled to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. After ripping out Sazu's soul, Naruto closed his eyes as he started to integrate the knowledge that the soul held into his own. Finding out all of the future operations of Gato and the places where kidnapped victims were held that Sazu had knowledge of. Opening them again, they had lost the burning crimson and were once again the same dull navy blue as before. Burning the bodies of the thugs with a simple Kaden jutsu and washing most of the blood off him with the hose that was nearby. Naruto headed back to Suna's home to take a much-needed shower. As Satsuki and Yukumo fled the building with the girl Amy, they found her mother looking around frantically for her. Reuniting the two, they returned to Suna's house to wait for their blonde teammate, hoping that he'd return in one piece. Their hopes were answered when Naruto entered the house covered in a little bit of blood. Instantly, they were over him, asking if he was all right, about what happened back there with his eyes, and about the thugs, telling the two that he took care of them and tied them up for whoever was in charge of security to take them in. Relieved that their premonition that he killed them was wrong, the unease they felt left their hearts as they breathed a sigh of relief. After telling Anko of the situation, she was proud that her genin did what they did, but not after she scolded and lectured them that what they did was reckless and stupid. After the interrogating that Anko put them through, Naruto specifically, she let them off the hook seeing as they had a rough day. Time skipped 3 days later. After nearly 2 weeks of waiting and training, Team 12's mission was close to being drawn to a close. Suna had told them that the finishing touches to the bridge were being made, that they should be finished with it by the end of the day. Excited both about the bridge being finished and about going home, the group decided not to train for the day, opting to save their energy in case of an emergency. Anko assigning her genin times to guard Tuna on the bridge and having them rotate every few hours. As the day carried on, the sun beginning to descend below the horizon, Naruto and Yukumo were supposed to be rotated with Anko and Satsuki, but Yukumo insisted that she stayed. Feeling like something was going to happen if both of them left Suna unguarded. Seeing as he wouldn't be able to change her mind and agreed with her, Naruto told her to tell Anko when she and Satsuki arrived. With that, Naruto headed back to Suna's house to check in on the family and rest. Scene change. To Zuna's home. Tsunami was in the kitchen starting to wash the dishes from lunch as Inari was in the bathroom washing up. Unknown to the two of them, two unknown people smirked as they drew closer to the house. Inari dear, could you hurry up and come help me with the dishes, please? Tsunami called out to her son as she rinsed the leftovers off the plates and stacked them to the side. Coming, Mom. I'm almost done. Inari called back. As he was about to head out of the bathroom door, he heard his mom cry out and started to run to the kitchen. Kaya, Tsunami cried out. Her eyes widened as two men kicked the door to her house. So, you must be Suna's daughter, Tsunami, ha, the taller of the two said as he and his partner started to approach her. Sorry, but you'll be coming with us, the shorter one said as he reached out to grab her arm. Mom. As he was about to grab her, Inari ran into the room, shouting for his mom and froze when he saw the men in his home. There's a kid here. Should we take him too? The tall man asked, inclining his head slightly towards his partner. Nah, we don't need him. We only need her. Get rid of him, he sneered as his partner pulled out his sword. But before any of them could do anything, Tsunami shouted at them. Don't you dare touch Inari. If you so much as touch a hair on his head, I'll bite my tongue off and drown myself. She shouted, her eyes burning. As his mom valiantly made a demand for his life, Inari could only fall onto his backside and start crying. Wishing that he could help his mom, that he could be a hero like Kaisa. Scene change the bridge. Arriving at their destination, Ango and Satsuki were surprised when they saw Yukumo with a kunai in her hand glancing around intently approaching her. Anko demanded to know what she was still doing here, but was surprised when the normally quiet girl told her that she didn't feel right leaving Suna unguarded, even for a few minutes. About to praise her for her thoughtfulness, Anko stiffened and started glancing around when a mist started to appear. So, looks like he's finally here, Anko said, narrowing her eyes as she drew a kunai from her pouch. Satsuki following suit as she quickly went to stand by Yukumo. The atmosphere was broken when a scream echoed out of the mist, causing the three to quickly rush to where it originated. And what they saw made them, especially Satsuki and Yukumo, freeze. Suna was kneeling down, holding one of the workers in his arms. The others were either unconscious or dead. What happened here? He shouted, his eyes wide in disbelief. Noticing that Anko and her students had arrived. Did Demon Ca came out of the mi mist stuttered the man before he lost consciousness. Demon then that means Yukumo began pulling out a kunai as she steadied herself into a defensive stance as she scanned the area. Zabuza is back. Satsuki finished pulling out her own kunai as she took a defensive stance next to her teammate and Suna. Everyone be on guard. You've seen what he's capable of. But don't expect things to go any easier. Expect them to be much harder, Anko said as she narrowed her eyes and tensed up, summoning her trusted Tonto that she's had since her time as an Ambu operative. As the group readied themselves, a thin mist started to roll in. Seeing the familiar mist, the group tensed a bead of sweat falling down Yukumo, Satsuki, and Tuna's head while Anko tightened the grip on her Tonto. Soon, two silhouettes were visible as they approached the group. One was familiar while the other wasn't as they were finally out of the mist they spoke. Where's the blonde brat? Me and him have unfinished business to attend to. Zabuza said as he scanned the group for Nar. Sorry, but he's not going to be joining us. You're just going to have to settle for little old me. Anko said in a cool tone as she took a step forward. I don't have time to waste dealing with you. I have a duel I need to finish. He said as he narrowed his eyes, tightening his grip on his Kubirio Bocho. But before he could do anything, his companion stepped forward. Zabuza-sama, please allow me to deal with these kunoichi. Save your strength for the boy. He is bound to return sooner or later. Haku said as she readied a handful of sunbi. Seeing Haku acting so willfully, Zabuza let a small smile work itself onto his face. Sighing at first, he went ahead and gave her the okay. Before Haku could move though, Anko had closed the distance between herself and Zabuza. Her Tandodo poised to pierce his heart as he swung his Kubiki Bocho to block the strike, resulting in a screech of metal and a shower of sparks. Change of plans, Haku. Take care of those brats. I'll take her on, Zabuza said as he narrowed his eyes, surprised by the speed and stealth of Anko. Snapping out of her stupor, Haku nodded before she moved to engage Satsuki and Yakumo. The two narrowing their eyes as they readied themselves for their opponent. You know that your genin aren't a match for Haku. She's at least jonin. While those two are chunin at best, Zabuza said in an attempt to throw off Anko, who gave a small smirk in return. You say that, but don't think that just because those two aren't as skilled as Naruto that they can't hold their own, retorted Anko, having seen the exceptional growth that her team had over the course of the past 2 weeks. As they finished exchanging words, Zabuza and Anko returned to their battle, their blades colliding in a brilliant shower of sparks. Scene change. Yukumo and Satsuki versus Haku. While their leaders were fighting, the three girls across the bridge had finally made contact with each other. Yukumo and Satsuki going immediately on the offensive, throwing a volley of shuriken at Haku, who to their complete shock, dodged without trouble. I'm sorry, but I'm probably the worst opponent for the two of you to face off. Haku said in a slightly apologetic tone as she drew a handful of sunbi. Narrowing her eyes, Satsuki didn't take kindly to the tone of voice that Haku was speaking in. Don't speak to us like you're better than us, she shouted before locking eyes with Yukumo, who nodded her head before they re-engaged with their masked opponent. Flashing through a series of hand seals, Satsuki locked onto Haku before she said, Suidaden, Tipodama. As she fired off a volley of basketball-sized bullets of water at Haku as Yukumo readied her own set of seals, preoccupied with dodging the surprisingly fast bullets of water, Haku never noticed that Yukumo had finished her own set of seals until she heard her speak. I'm ready, Satsuki, Yukumo called out, before Satsuki ended her assault and jumped to the side, exposing Haku to her. Swed, Masorapa, Yukumo said as she put her hands in front of her mouth and fired a fast medium-sized jet of water that managed to connect with a stunned Haku, blasting her a few meters back. Scene change, Anko versus Zabuza. Seeing her genin handle the kunoichi that Zabuza said was John and level brought a smile to Anko's face. The teamwork that the two displayed was absolutely astounding. Her confidence now increased by tenfold. She wasn't going to be shown up by her girls and applied more pressure to the stunned Zabuza. Slashing and stabbing with renewed vigor as he blocked and countered her strikes. Zabuza was shocked. He didn't expect those two girls to take down Haku. But after the shock came confidence. Haku had probably forgotten that it wasn't one-on-one, but 2-on-1. Now that she actually got hit, she wouldn't make the same mistake twice. A smirk was hidden behind his bandages as he blocked a slash aimed at the back of his neck and retaliated with a back fist that was avoided. Looks like your partner isn't as tough as you made her out to be. Anko jeered at Zabuza. However, she didn't expect to get a dark chuckle in return. You keep talking all you want. Haku fell for a decent little plan, but now she won't fall for it again. Just hope that your genin won't be too torn up once she's done with them. Zabuza said as he charged Anko once again, noticing that she had stiffened up slightly at the foreboding words. Scene change. Yukumo and Satsuki versus Haku. Haku was angry at herself for forgetting that there were two opponents, not just one. While the black-haired girl rained bullets of water at her, she momentarily forgot about the brown-haired girl behind her until she was hit by a jet of water, which sent her flying back and knocked the air out of her lungs. Having had enough, Haku decided to finish the battle before the tide shifted in their favor. I have to admit, your teamwork is extraordinary. But I have to end things here, Haku whispered, slipping into the mist as it started to become thicker than it was before. After their plan worked, Satsuki and Yukumo were feeling unbeatable. That is, until they heard the voice of their opponent echo out of the mist, which seemed to have gotten thicker over the past few minutes as they regrouped to continue their attack. Standing back to back, they tensed as they lost sight of their opponent. Frantically scanning the area, they failed to find a trace of her as the mist devoured their field of view, limiting it to only a meter at best. Finally, they heard, or rather saw her, as their eyes widened in fear at what they had heard and saw. Hayatan Makio Hayasho Haku said, as a dome of mirrors made of ice surrounded the duo, an image of their opponent in each and every one. I'm sorry, but this will be the end for the two of you. Haku said ominously before steel rained down on the two. Scene changed to Zuna's house. As tears started to fall from his eyes at the selflessness of his mother, Inari couldn't help but feel powerless as the two men shrugged and advanced on his mother. Falling deeper into despair, Inari had flashbacks to his time spent with his mother, grandfather, and Kaisa. Then it flashed to the words that Naruto left him before he left the house that night. Gritting his teeth and steeling his resolve, Inari stood up before he charged the two men that had his mother in their clutches, ignoring the taller of the two men unsheathing his sword. Inari screamed, "Tsunami!" Seeing that her son was about to be cut down even after she bartered with her own life. Have fun in hell, brat, the man said as he swung at Inari, aiming to cleave him in two. But the strike never came. The sound of flesh being cut didn't resound, and instead the sound of metal against metal screeched violently throughout the house. Everyone stopped. Tsunami and Inari tearing up at the sight of the newcomer, while the men, however, froze in fear. His Basudoto blocking the strike intended for Inari. Naruto stood firm, his eyes freezing the very soul of the man in front of him. Before anyone could say anything, Naruto swung and sent the sword in the man's hand flying before slamming the flat of his blade against the back of his head. A sickening crack resulting from the blow. Seeing his partner get beaten down so easily, the shorter man quickly brought his sword up to Tsunami's neck in a desperate attempt to seize control of the situation. Don't you move. If you do, her neck gets cut open. He screamed, his eyes wide in fear and anger. Seeing that Nar had stopped, he smirked before barking out his demands. Good. Now drop your sword and put your arm out to the side. Do anything else and she gets it, he said, edging the blade closer to Tsunami's neck to prove his point. Nar did as he was instructed, but he confused the man when a small smirk appeared on his face. The air you smiling about? I said that you do anything else in GWA. He didn't get to finish his statement as Inari smashed his groin with a brick. While his attention was focused solely on Nar, he never noticed that Inari was slowly inching his way towards him and his mother. Letting go of Tsunami and instinctively reaching down to cover his groin. He didn't notice that Nar had reached his side until his world went black when Naruto's foot connected with the side of his head, sending him flying a few feet. The thugs dispatched with Inari and Tsunami embraced each other, tears streaming down their faces at the brush with death that both had experienced. Eventually, they stopped when Naruto approached the two, his face still blank. But slowly, a small smile came to his face as he reached out and ruffled Inari's hair softly. That was a very brave thing to do, Inari, ignoring your own safety to save your mother. That right there is something that a hero would do, Naruto said as Inari's eyes went wide as he looked at him. Really? Inari timidly said, still in disbelief at what the teen had said. With a smile filled with love and pride, Tsunami hugged Inari tighter. He's right, Inari. You did something that a hero would do. Removing his hand from Inari's head, Naruto quickly told the two to find someplace safe to stay, telling them that a battle is definitely going to happen before he ran to the bridge. Staring at the back of the teen, Inari gained a determined face before he nodded and ran towards the center of the village. His mother quickly chasing after him. Scene change. Yakumo and Satsuki versus Haku. Pain. Pain was all that she could feel at the moment. After Satsuki and herself were trapped in this dome of ice, their opponent had rained down steel on them. No matter how much they tried to dodge or counterattack, they weren't able to land a solid blow on her. In contrast to their opponent whose only visible damage were the tears in her kimono, Yakumo and Satsuki were covered in blood and sunburned from Haku's relentless assault. She never let up her attacks and simply dodged mirror to mirror when they used their jutsu and weapons against her. Haha Yakumo, what did we do now? Satsuki asked. The pain she was feeling was like no other she had felt before. Her body was starting to go numb and she knew that Yakumo wasn't faring any better. I don't care no Satsuki. She's too fast for us to hit and we don't know which mirror she's hiding in. We were outclassed here, Yakumo said in a slightly defeated tone, the situation being extremely dire, the tide of battle in favor of their opponent. Hearing her teammate's defeated tone, Satsuki could only grit her teeth and clench her fists, knowing that what Yakumo said was true. Observing the duo, Haku felt pity for them. Like the brown-haired girl said, they were outmatched, especially since they were trapped in her jutsu. Deciding that it was time to end it, she drew another handful of sunbi and took aim at the black-haired girl. Seeing their opponent draw another handful of sunbi, Yakumo and Satsuki tensed up, fear and apprehension visible on their faces. However, Yakumo noticed amidst the mist and mirrors their opponent's hand come flying out of the mirror to the upper right of Satsuki, the flash of steel heading towards Satsuki, overruling her sense of self-preservation. Without thinking, Yakumo shoved Satsuki out of the way of the sunbon. Hitting the ground after being shoved by Yakumo, Satsuki turned to shout, but the words died in her throat when she saw Yakumo's chest get pierced by a volley of sunbi. The shout that died in her throat was revived as scream when Yakumo hit the ground and remained motionless. Yakumo. Ignoring the searing pain that coursed through her body, Satsuki sprinted to her teammate and cradled her body in her arms. Yakumo. Yakumo, wake up, she shouted, shaking her teammate, her eyes wide in disbelief and grief. Her shouts were answered when she got a soft groan in response. Saw Satsuki, Yakumo said weakly, her eyes glazed and unfocused as she weakly held the hand of her teammate. Idiot. You idiot. Why? Why did you do that? Satsuki demanded, tears flowing from her eyes as she questioned her teammate's decision to save her. Haha, why? We're teammates, Satsuki, and we're friends. Right. Yakumo weakly responded, her brown eyes staring into Satsuki's tear-filled onyx-colored ones. Tears flowing freely from her eyes, Satsuki tightened her grip on Yakumo's hand before she lowered her head, her body shaking slightly at Yakumo's words. Sniff. Yeah, we're friends. You're my best friend. My first friend and my first best friend. So, please, please don't die. Don't leave me, Yukumo. Satsuki swallowed her pride and voiced the thoughts that rang true in her heart. Over the past few months of working, training, hanging out, and eating together, Yukumo had become the first person to melt the ice that encased her heart, the first person that Satsuki could honestly call a friend. A word and notion that for 13 years eluded her. Yukuma widened her eyes at Satsuki's tearful confession before they closed slightly, tears falling from her eyes as a smile appeared on her face as she squeezed Satsuki's hand back. I'm glad, Satsuki. I really am. I'm glad that I got to know the real you. I'm glad that I got to see how sweet and strong you really are. And I'm glad that I'm your best friend because you're my best friend, too. Closing her eyes, Yukumo gave Satsuki a brilliant smile that sapped the last of her strength. Feeling the grip of her best friend loosen, Satsuki could only look on in disbelief as Yukumo's hand fell onto her stomach and remained there. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. She just stayed still. Ya Yukumo. Yukumo, wake up. This isn't funny. We were supposed to get through this now and go back home together. Yukumo. Ya Yukumo. Softly shaking the now cold body of her best friend. Satsuki could only whimper and beg her to wake up. After a few minutes, Satsuki gently put her down and stood up, her bangs obscuring her eyes. Throughout the whole exchange, Haku remained silent, letting Satsuki grieve over her loss. She felt a pang shoot through her heart, seeing the strong girl from before become a shell of her former self. But that was the life of a ninja, the life that they lived. But what she wasn't prepared for was what happened next. Standing in the middle of the dome, next to the corpse of her best friend, Satsuki couldn't feel anything. The pain from before was gone. In its place, a strange numbness throbbed throughout her body. But soon the two was replaced by a burning fury that coursed through her veins. Snapping her head up, she locked on with the mirror that contained her opponent to their shock. Her onyx eyes were now crimson, her left eye having one tomo and her right eye two. She sped through a series of hand seals at astonishing speed before she growled at Haku. I'm going to kill you, she shouted before calling out a jutsu that shocked Haku, not expecting a girl like her to know such a powerful judo. Sweet and swear you and no jutsu. Satsuki roared as dragon made of water formed behind her roaring before it charged towards a stunned Haku. Scene change. Enko vs Zabuza. Hearing Satsuki's grief-stricken scream of Yukumo's name, Enko froze, knowing that something horrible must have happened. Her suspicions were then answered when Satsuki used the jutsu that she had taught the two of them earlier in the week, one that she had deliberately told them to never use unless it was an emergency. Well, looks like Haku took care of one of them. I'll admit they sure did give her a hard time that Brad managed to use a swear, huh? Pretty impressive, Zabuza commented, blocking a strike from an enraged Enko. I'm going to end the two of you in the most painful way possible, she whispered, her eyes cold and sharp, promising to act on her threat as she lunged forward with her tanto catching Zabuza on the arm. Scary eyes you got there, but that's all that's scary. He responded, getting cut slightly by her tanto. Sidestepping, he slipped by her guard before swinging Kubiki Bocho in a vertical slash to bisect her, which Enko dodged, retaliating with a side swipe, which Zabuza blocked once again. They had been fighting for almost an hour now, both were covered in cuts and scratches, but nothing debilitating enough to cause one to gain the upper hand. Having had enough of this battle, Enko flashed through a series of seals before glaring at Zabuza. Sinu. Enko shouted before a series of snakes shot out of her sleeves towards Zabuza, who managed to evade all but one snake. Gah! Zabuza shouted, having had one of the snakes land a bite on his forearm. Immediately after being bit, his arm went numb, and slowly he lost the ability to use it. The feeling of numbness slowly creeping its way up his arm. Hey, looks like it's game over, Zabuza. The snake that bit you didn't have any of the more deadly venom. It had a powerful paralytic neurotoxin. It won't kill you, but you're not going to be moving anytime soon. Just as Zabuza was about to make a retort, a wave of water crashed nearby. Haku appearing next to him slightly out of breath with her legs slightly bent out of place. Ha ha. My apologizes Zabuza-sama, but I wasn't able to finish off the other girl. She surprised me with her jutsu and managed to escape from my Makio Hayaso. Haku reported in a dejected tone, supporting her master as he lost the feeling from left side of his body. Arriving to the scene next was Satsuki holding Yukumo bridal style, who quickly made her way to her sensei. Seeing her genin in such a rough state, Enko couldn't even get angry. The anger she felt evaporated into concern, especially when she laid eyes on the pale Yukumo in Satsuki's arms. Looking at her, Satsuki looked down and shook her head, and Enko immediately knew as she felt her anger bubble back up. But the tense situation was broken when they heard a cane tapping on the edge of the bridge. Well, well, well. Looks like the demon of the hidden mist turned out to be a failure. A voice sneered from the mist. Slowly, a small silhouette made its way to the group, and when he arrived, Zabuza let out a growl. Godto had seen the last part of the battle, and to say he was displeased would be an understatement. He had hired Zabuza because of his renowned skill, but apparently a woman and a couple of girls were enough to stop him. The did you say, you bastard? Zabuza roared at him, having his pride stepped on by a scumbag like God didn't sit well with him at all. You had better apologize to Zabuza-sama or else. Hearing her master be insulted by this pitiful excuse for a human being infuriated Haku to no end. If not for the fact it would leave Zabuza defenseless, she would have lunged at him. Hey, big talk from a dead man. Why do you think I decided to come now of all times? Huh, the lot of you are worn down and injured from your little battle. So, I figured it's time to clean up. Get the hell out here. As he shouted, a large mob of hired mercenaries and thugs started making their way behind him. Seeing the new threat in front of them, the group tensed up. All of them were injured, and if they weren't, they were exhausted from the past hour of fighting. The best option now would be to retreat. But they wouldn't get far, seeing as there were some ninja mixed into the army that God had assembled. They tensed up even more when they heard what God said next. All right, well, time's up. Kill them all. But if you bring me back any of those girls and that women, you'll get a bonus bigger than you can imagine, he said in a leerous tone, making a shiver run up the spines of the females present. Before any of them could know anything, Zabuza stood up on his own and took up a defensive stance in front of the small group to the surprise of everyone. You pig, you aren't touching a hair on any of them. SP, not Haku. Zabuza growled out. He may not have been the kindest or purest of people. He was far from it. But there were some things that even he thought was evil. What Gato was saying was one of those things. Damn, my body is still numb from that snake. I can barely move, but I should be able to buy some time for Haku to get out of here. Haku. Hearing Zabuza speak to her in such a soft tone made her eyes widen, not liking the ominous undertone to his voice. Yes Zabuza-sama. She timidly said, I want you to get out of here right now. Zabuza said in a tone of finality. However, it was badly received by Haku. What are you saying, Zabuza-sama? You want me to abandon you? She nearly screamed, her eyes wide at the obscene order from her master. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I may not have been the best person, and I don't have many things that I cherish anymore, but I'll let you know that I did cherish you, even if I didn't show it. With that, Zabuza staggered slightly before he rushed towards the army to the shock and horror of the group. Zabuza-sama, Haku screamed, not believing what she was seeing. Hey, looks like this is how I go. Not too bad. The demon of the hidden mist, protecting a group of girls from a scumbag who hired and then betrayed him. What a twist. But before the two opposing sides reached each other, a crescent-shaped wave of chakra stuck's army, shredding the men in the front. What was the collective thoughts of the people present until they heard the footsteps echo out of the now clearing mist? Narco shouted, relieved that her student was safe and that he was here with them. Her sentiments were shared with the rest of the group. Satsuki releasing the breath that she held, Haku tensing before relaxing, and Zabuza cracking a small grin. Sorry I'm late, Enko-sensei. There was another small militia group that tried to attack the town that I had to take care of. He replied, his eyes never leaving the army in front of them. Goo, you damned brat. They were supposed to take out the rest of the village. God shouted, enraged that his backup plan was ruined by a child. Enko-sensei, could you get Zabuza-san some antivvenom and take a soldier pill? We'll be able to beat them if we join forces. I'm sure of it. Naruto suggested, taking up a protective stance his basudodo held in front of him. We've got no choice, huh? Fine, let's do this. Enko said, pulling out a small syringe and tossing it to Zabuza, who injected it into himself while she popped a soldier pill. Let's do this thing, Zabuza roared, being able to slowly feel his limbs again. Though they weren't 100%, they would be enough to deal with this filth. Ha, don't get Zabuza. You're probably as slow as a tunin. Take it easy. Enko taunted Zabuza with a grin, who in turn grinned back. Let's go. The three shouted before they charged the army to the shock of the girls who couldn't help but gawk at the three. Chaos was the only thing to describe what happened. Enko swiftly stabbed and slashed through the vitals of anyone who got in her way, quickly taking out her targets without them being able to mount a counterattack. Zabuza hacked and cleaved his way through everyone that stood in front of him, cutting through the army like a hot knife through butter. Each swing taking out 2 to 3 people unfortunate enough to be caught in his path of dismemberment. Naruto was similar to Zabuza, cutting though his opponents, but not aiming to kill and instead opting to cut off limbs. Because they didn't die, his opponents were forced to lay in the gore of their allies before they were dealt with by a blow to their heads. Curiosity of Naruto's foot. After only a few minutes, God's army had been reduced to half to the horror of the remaining members. Gato, in particular, started shaking uncontrollably as he tried to run, only to lose his leg from another crescent-shaped wave of chakra from Nar. Ga! He screamed, clutching onto the stump that used to be his right leg. The remaining men quickly being dispatched by the three who stood against them. Now crying pitifully, God turned around only to face three demons. One had the aura of a demonic purple snake, the other the aura of a violet-on-light creature, and the final had the aura of a black and crimson reptile-like monster. Please don't kill M, he begged, tears streaming down his face, the terror that he felt unlike anything that he ever felt before. Before Anko or Zabuza could act, Naruto suddenly made his way towards Gato before lashing out and grabbing the short man by the throat, crushing it slightly. Gao! He wheezed out, unable to take much air into his lungs from the grip that this monster had on him. You don't know how much I want to kill you. Even right now, I'm doing everything in my power to stop myself from crushing your throat. But that luxury isn't for me, Naruto whispered before throwing God to the ground, breaking his nose and knocking a few teeth out. As she said that, a small army appeared at the opposite end of the bridge, led by Inari, who was holding a crossbow. Naruto and Shin were here to protect the wave. He shouted as the villagers behind him shouted in agreement, but they were soon quieted when they saw the carnage that littered the bridge, some turning green and other losing their lunches at the scene. Suna winced, but he knew it was needed in order to save the wave. And he also didn't feel anything for the men who tried to take his home from him. You've seen them, God. They'll be your judges, jury, and of course, executioners. Hope the pain doesn't end too soon. With that statement, Naruto grabbed Gato once more before hurling him to the opposite side of the bridge, breaking a few of his bones from the throat. There he is. Kill him. No, make him suffer first. The villagers immediately congregated on the man, his screams echoing across the village. Time skipped 2 hours later. After the battle on the bridge and the torture and execution of Gato, Nami no Kuni had finally been freed. Using the information that he gained from Sazu, Naruto had told the villagers of the whereabouts of those who were kidnapped and of God's stronghold to which the villagers promised they would go and take. While tense at first, the two groups, Team 12 and Zabuza and Haku, made peace with each other. At first there was no trust given the prior circumstances, but once Haku revealed that she had not killed Yakumo, but put her in a suspended sleep, they lost all anger that they had towards her. When Yakuma woke up, she was promptly glumped by Satsuki and Anko, who were worried sick about her. Satsuki bawling her eyes out, telling her not to do something stupid like that again. Nar also expressed his concern by asking if she needed anything, to which she said no. Anko having healed all of them from most of their more debilitating injuries. Eventually, the time came to leave Nami no Kuni, which was a tearful moment. The group having been hailed as heroes by the villagers for protecting their homeland. Well, looks like this is goodbye, huh? Zabuza said, his voice strangely sad, the group having grown on him in the past few hours. It seems so. What are we going to do now, Zabuza-sama? Haku asked in a sad tone. Their main source of income now gone. Don't know, Haku. Guess we'll just wander the nations again. Zabuza replied, looking off into the distance. Seeing the two like that caused Team 12 to look at them with pity. A life on the run was difficult. That is until Naruto suggested something outrageous. Zabuza Sanaku-san, why not come back with us to Naha? Nar said, everyone freezing once they heard him. What joking aren't you, brat? Zabuza said in a doubtful tone of voice, though there was a small hint of hope in his eyes. I'm not joking, Zabuza-san. If you willingly come to Konoha with the intent to join, it can offer you amnesty from Kuriger and a position as ninja. Though you'll probably be on suspension and under surveillance for a while, it's better than being on the run. At his words, not just Zabuza and Haku were shocked, the rest of Team 12 was stunned as well. Even Ango thought that plan was ingenious. You're not pulling my leg or anything, right, brat? Zabuza asked in a surprisingly hopeful tone. I'm Nad Zabuza-san, I actually hope that you accept. We still haven't finished out duel, you know. Naruto said, shaking his head and driving the final nail in the coffin with his last statement. I don't know what to say. What do you think? Haku think it's fine if we join Konoha. Zabuza turned and asked his younger companion. I would like to try, Zabuza-sama. We've been running for a long time now. It would be nice to settle down somewhere safe. Haku timidly said, still not used to the newly discovered soft side of her master. Well, if Haku says that she wants to try, I'm willing to try as well. Zabuza finally agreed, extending his hand towards Anko. Well, now that everything is under the bridge, literally, it can't hurt to try, right? Anko said, meeting Zabuza's hand in a firm handshake. Then it's settled. Let's head back home, Naruto said as the group bid farewell to the villagers of the wave to which they called back out to them. Everyone, thank you. Thank you for giving us back our lives. The villagers shouted to the group. Naruto Nin, I'll do it. I'll embrace my dreams and become a true hero like you. Inari shouted at his new older brother figure. Well, now that everything is settled, why not give a name to the bridge, huh? I think that the Great Suna Bridge has a nice ring to it. Suna suggested, which most of his fellow villagers booed at. How about the Great Naruto Bridge? Inari suggested with a smile. The rest of the village cheering loudly at the fitting name for the one who had most to do with saving their village. My name was better. Ha. The Great Naruto Bridge. Ha, I think it sounds great. Suna laughed as Nami Nukuni celebrated the first festival that marked the day that it earned its freedom from a corrupt crime lord thanks to the combined efforts of 4 Konoha ninja and 2 missing nin. After departing from Nami no Kuni, the group of Naruto, Anko, Yukumo, Satsuki, Zabuza, and Haku had a silent and slightly awkward trek back to Konoha. The main source of this stemmed from the events that happened over the past few hours. Team 12 still not trusting the two and vice versa. Soon, the lull of the moment was broken by Anko, who decided to ask about the past few years of the new members of their group. So, where have the two of you traveled over the past few years? Anko asked, trying to dispel the awkward atmosphere. We've been here and there. We never really stayed in one place for too long. Didn't know if Hunter Nin were snooping around, so we tried to make as little contact with people as possible, only stopping to trade with a few merchants before we left. Zabuza replied, releasing a relieved sigh that someone broke the ice. It's just as Zabuza-sama said. We didn't stay in one place for very long at all. In fact, our time in Nami no Kuni was probably the longest we've stayed in one place. Haku chipped in, also glad the Anko had broken the ice. Soon, the group fell into a comfortable conversation, the girls asking the two about their travels and adventures over the past few years. A big shocker for them was that Haku was only a year older than them, which was astonishing considering how strong she was. Time skip. A few hours later, after Anko broke the ice and they finally became comfortable around each other, time flew by quicker than they thought. During their conversation, night had fallen, forcing them to set up camp for the night. Well, that was a fun conversation, huh? Anko cheerfully said, having learned some interesting things about the pair as she started to prepare the fire. Hey, I'll admit it wasn't so bad. I half expected you brought to keep quiet like the adults talked. Zabuza said, laughing slightly as he proceeded to pitch the tent. It was fun. I'm glad that I got to know Enko-san, Yukumo-san, Satsuki-san, and Naruto-san a little more. Haku happily said, helping her master with pitching the tents. TCH. Whatever. It's not like your stories were interesting or anything. I was just trying to kill the time. Satsuki said, helping Yukumo with collecting firewood. I agree with Haku-san. It was very nice to get to know you and Zabuza-san more. Yukumo also cheerfully said, piling on the firewood that Satsuki brought her. While the others were happily chatting with each other, Naruto opted to remain silent as he did during the past few hours. It wasn't that he wasn't interested, but rather he was thinking about his plan when Zabuza and Haku entered the gates. No doubt having an A- class missing nin from Kiri is going to warrant action, no matter how peaceful they appeared. After they had finished setting up camp, Naruto had offered to keep watch, which the other accepted gratefully. However, instead of waking one of them up to switch shifts with, he stayed up the whole night, letting the others get a full night of sleep. When morning broke, everyone had realized that none of them remembered ever being woken up to switch shifts with their blonde companion. Rushing out of their tents, they were met with the delicious aroma of something cooking that tantalized their noses. Looking towards the direction of its source, they saw Nar standing over the fire from last night, a pot and pan cooking up breakfast. Dumbfounded by the sight, they were broken out of their thoughts when their stomachs rumbled, catching the attention of the blonde. Oh, good morning everyone. Did you all sleep well? I hope so. Breakfast will be ready in a few minutes, so please go wash up before you come eat. Like a mother, Naruto ordered the remaining members of his group to get ready for the day before they ate. Quickly washing up, Zabuza was the first to get done as he sat down on a log that rested near the fire. Figuring that since the rest of the group consisted of females, they'd have a little time to kill before they got back. Hey, brat, so you all right? You stayed up the whole night without swapping out, you know, Zabuza said. trying to start up a conversation with the blonde. I'm fine, Zabuza saying. One member losing a night of sleep for 5 others to get fully rested is a fair trade in my opinion. Naruto replied, finishing with frying the strips of bacon and eggs while stirring the breakfast stew that consisted of potatoes, sausage, and various other vegetables. After hearing the blonde's reasoning, Zabuza could only laugh. Not that it was funny, but because it made so much sense. Haha. Well, if you put it that way, it does make sense. So, tell me, where do you learn Kenjutsu? That style that you use in that sword, they look so familiar to me, yet they don't. Who taught you? He asked, the question that had been nagging at him since the moment they crossed swords weeks ago. Turning slightly to face the older man, Nar just gave him a blank stare before he shrugged, turning back to finish up cooking. Sorry, Zabuza-san, but that I can't tell you, but the one who taught me was like an older brother to me. Naruto said, to which Zabuza nodded, understanding that he didn't want to be pressed to answer anything else. Well, when you're ready, brat. Make sure I'm the first person that you tell. All right. Moving past the slightly uncomfortable topic, the two moved on to swordsmanship, jutsu, and training. Soon, Zabuza had a wide grin on his face and was laughing, patting Naruto on the back as Naruto had a small smile on his. If one were to look at the scene without any prior knowledge of the two, they would have suspected that they held a close bond with each other. 4 people did see the scene. 2 were bewildered at the odd display of closeness. 1 just smiled at the display and the final pouted at the sight. Hey, how come you never act that way around me, huh? Enko complained, pouting at Naruto for never showing her the same smile that was on his face at the moment. Hearing her voice, the two turned around and were greeted with the sight of the rest of their little group back from a lengthy half-hour-long session of washing up. That's because you aren't as great as I am, Zabuza proudly said, puffing out his chest as he boasted to a now IATE Anko. The tension was broken by soft giggling from Haku as she approached the two happy for her master. I'm very happy for you, Zabuza-sama. You found someone who you can truly connect with. Haku said innocently, not realizing the double entendre of her words. The way you put it makes it sound really wrong, Haku. Zabuza muttered as Anko smirked while the rest of the group blushed slightly. Though the atmosphere turned awkward for a brief moment, it was soon broken when everyone started laughing and gather around for a delicious breakfast, courtesy of the blonde sitting with them. Packing up quickly and removing any traces of their overnight stay from the clearing, the group continued on towards Konoha with the light of the rising sun. Time skipped 2 hours later. Finally, with the sun overhead in the cloudless blue sky, the group had finally made it to Konoha. The immense gates a welcome sight after nearly a month of being away. While the Konoha ninja were looking on in fondness, besides a blank-faced Naruto, Zabuza and Haku looked on in awe, the two never having truly seen the impressive gates in person. How amazing. They're enormous, Haku said, her eyes wide as she stared at the sight in front of her. All my life, I've never seen them in person. Really dwarfs the stories that you hear from other people, Zabuza said, whistling in appreciation at the sight. As they neared the gates, the familiar faces of Kotetsu and Izumo came into view. Hey, Amo looked. Kotetsu nudged his partner awake, seeing faces he hadn't seen in nearly a month. Wah, what is it, Katu? Amo said groggy, his brain still in the process of booting up. Looks like Team 12 is back from their mission. Took them a lot longer than I expected, though. Thought it was just an escort mission. No, you don't. It was an escort and protection mission. Didn't you write down their mission details for leaving? Amo snapped, knocking his partner on the head for his memory slip. Once they got to the gates, the two greeted them, but paused when they saw who they were with. Is that Zazabuza Mamochi? Katu stuttered out, clearly intimidated by the man in front of him. His partner was also shaken up, the clipboard in his hand shaking along with his body. Seeing their scared states, Anko quickly diffused the situation before things got out of hand. Hey, he's with us. We need to get to the Hogue Tower immediately. So, hurry up so we can get a move on, she ordered. As the two instantly stiffened up and followed through, however, before they could process Zabuza and Haku, a squad of Anbu surrounded the two. Halt. The two of you are under arrest. A boar-masked Anbu said, taking a step towards Zabuza and Haku. But before either side could retaliate, Naruto stepped in between them. Inu-san, I know that you're doing your duty to protect the village, but these two are under the protection and are being escorted to the Hokage himself by Team 12. Due to circumstances of our mission, they have decided to join Konoha willingly as a way to gain amnesty from Koreak. So, please allow us to proceed with our passage, Naruto said in a level tone. But during the exchange, his eyes started to spark an electric blue glow as opposed to his normal navy. Stiffening slightly from the soul-piercing gaze of the boy in front of him, the Anbu relented, signaling the rest of his squad to disperse. Whoa, that was impressive, Nar, staring down an Anbu captain and actually talking back to him. You got some balls, brat, Enko said, whistling slightly in awe at the exchange. Hey, thanks for sticking up for us, brat. I half expected a fight to break out, Zabuza admitted, patting Nar on the shoulder as a sign of thanks. Thank you for standing up for us, Naruto-san. That was very brave of you to do so, Haku said in a bashful tone. A light dusting of pink on her cheeks as she smiled at him. She never noticed that behind her, Yukumo and Satsuki's eyes started twitching slightly. After settling the tense moment from before, the group headed towards their original goal, ignoring the slightly tense atmosphere around them from the people who knew who they were, specifically Zabuza. Scene change. Hogue's tower. Eventually, they made it to the top of the tower. The secretary nervous knowing the face of the man in front of her, but eventually allowed them inside. Team 12 went inside without problems. Though they were on guard, strangely, they acted somewhat protective of the two who followed behind them. In contrast to the cool yet cautious entrance of the four in front of them, Zabuza and Haku were nervous and tense. Haku especially. But most of her anxiousness vanished when Zabuza put a comforting hand on her shoulder and squeezed it gently, reassuring her that everything would be fine. Finally, they stood in front of Minato, who had a squad of ambush stationed near the windows, earning a nervous glance from the two outsiders. Team 12, welcome back from your mission. That certainly took much longer than I anticipated. I imagine that some complications came up correct. Minato spoke calmly, though near the end he casted a glance to the two behind them. Hi, Hokage-sama. The C-rank mission that was assigned to us about a month ago quickly escalated into A rank due to the influence of various missing nin and mercenaries. Enko reported, her arms folded behind her back. Behind her, Yukumo and Satsuki gulped when they saw Minato's eyes widen at the bit of information, obviously expecting the worst lecture of their lives. You mean to tell me that you broke common procedure and carried out the mission regardless of the danger that was present? Minato said, his voice growing colder as he neared the end, causing a bead of sweat to drop down the heads of everyone present. Hi Hokage-sama, but I assure you that it was. She was cut off by Minato in the middle of explaining her reason for doing so. Enko mission protocol states that in the event that a mission isn't what was requested, the team or ninja is to immediately return back to the village and blacklist the individual that requested it. You brought 3 genin who haven't had any experience with missions outside of the village on an A-rank mission that could have cost them their lives. Do you know how irresponsible that is? Minato nearly shouted at the end, obviously displeased by her actions. Enko could only drop her head in shame, her genin looking on with wide eyes at the exchange. What you did endangered the lives of the ones who you're supposed to be helping nurture and grow. What if one or all of them died? What would you have done? By this point, Enko was shaking slightly, her hands clenched into fists as Minato's words started cutting her much more deeply than before, having flashbacks to her old Ambu squad that died because of her. Honestly, I expected better from you. You should what breaking protocol entails, but you went ahead and did it anyway. Even for Yuta, Minato wasn't able to finish his lecture as Naruto stepped forward in front of his team, his usually blank navy eyes replaced with cold electric blue ones. That's enough, Hokage-sama, Nar said, raising his voice at Minato, stunning the occupants in the room from the anger that was held in it. While most of what you have said is true, Enko-sensei didn't break protocol on her own. If you had listened to the rest of her report, you would have learned that it wasn't her who decided to do so. I was the one who insisted that we carry on and continue the mission. Nar said, his eyes narrowed at Minato, angry at the fact that he started lecturing Enko before he knew all the facts about the mission. Narco softly said, tears starting to lace the corners of her eyes from a combination of Minato's lecturing and Naruto's words in her defense. Hokage-sama. It wasn't just Nar. We all agreed as a team to keep on going. Satsuki said as she stepped forward next to Naruto, not letting her teammate take all the blame for what happened during the mission. Satsuki and Naro are right. Hokage-sama. Enko-sensei told us to turn back and follow protocol, but we insisted that we continue with the mission regardless of what would happen. Yukumo said as she also stood with her team, knowing that Enko wasn't the one to blame. You guys, seeing her genin standing up for her was the last straw as Enko let a few stray tears fall from her eyes. As you can see, Hokage-sama, we were the ones who broke protocol. Enko-sensei was simply doing her duties as a sensei and allowing us to carve our own path as ninja as she protects and guides us. If there is anyone who you wish to place blame on, then place it on me. But don't think about placing it on Enko-sensei or my teammates because they aren't the ones responsible for any of this. Nar said, his eyes never losing the fierceness that burned inside of them. Everyone was stunned by Naruto's vocal defense of his teammates, especially Minato, who had never heard his son's voice be more than a deadpan. Finally, after a few tense seconds, Minato sighed. Anko, I sincerely apologize for my actions. I should have let you finish your report before I said anything else. Minato said in a solemn tone, disappointed at himself for his actions. It's fine. Hokage-sama. I understand that you were concerned about my genin and about mission protocol. Anko quickly replied, wiping the remaining tears from her eyes, a small smile back on her face. The tense moment passing, Anko gave her report of what transpired over the course of the mission from the demon brothers to God to the reason as to why Zabuza and Haku were here now. Though she did leave out the battles that happened knowing that Nar wouldn't appreciate it. So Zabuza-san, Haku-san, you want to join Konoha? I'm sorry for being rude, but why? Minato questioned the two, still skeptical that such a ninja would join out of the blue. Hokage-sama, I know that you don't trust me and will probably never fully be able to either, but I don't have any ulterior motives other than to be able to stop running. I've grown tired of running and I honestly just want a place that I can call home, and so I can spar with this blonde brat whenever I want, Zabuza said, telling Minato of his honest reasons for wanting to join. But the last part of his statement made Minato tilt his head in confusion. Huh? Do you mean spar with Nar? Minato asked, greatly confused at first, but then he became suspicious when Zabuza gained a confused look while Team 12 looked nervous. Is there something that you're not telling me? He asked, or rather demanded, looking at his son. Sighing, Anko gave her report once again, though this time she didn't leave out the parts about Naruto. To say Minato was shocked was an understatement. His eyes were wide and he wasn't able to believe any of the scenes that Anko described until Zabuza and the rest of the group vouched for him. Regaining his composure and shelving the questions he had for his son for later, he questioned Zabuza and Haku once more about what they could offer the village. Of course, Zabuza offered a wide repertoire of Suidan jutsu as well as his loyalty and services, which Haku also offered. Haku also told Minato about her Kikjenk, although reluctantly, which added to the pile of reasons that they should be allowed to join. But Minato was shocked once again when Naruto also vouched for the two of them, telling him that the two would be great assets allies to have, saying that he would even take responsibility if anything were to happen that involved the two, going so far as to bow to him. Seeing his son risk his own reputation and pride, Minato couldn't disagree. Finally, Minato agreed, seeing that the pros greatly outweighed the cons of letting the two join. Well, now that is all settled, I would like to personally welcome you to Konoha, Minato said with a smile as Zabuza grinned while Haku returned the smile. Why don't we get all the paperwork out of the way first, though? Zabuza-san will be using the same name, right? Minato asked, pulling out a series of forms as he questioned the younger man. That's right, Hokage-sama. I would like to keep my name if possible. Zabuza replied as Minato smiled and jotted Zabuza's first and last name down. Now then, Haku-chan, what about your name? He asked once more to a very quiet Haku to the concern of the people present. As Minato was about to ask if she was all right, Zabuza stepped in. Hokage-sama. Haku will keep her first name, but her last name will be Mimochi. Zabuza said in a stern tone to the absolute shock of everyone present. Zabuza-sama, what are you saying? Haku frantically asked, though a part of her was hoping that he wasn't joking. You heard me, Haku, your last name will be the same as mine. He said in a soft tone, putting his hand on her head, making her blush at the foreign show of affection. So I can assume that Minato started a smile on his face, knowing what Zabuza was implying. Yes, you can. And Hokage-sama. I'll be adopting Haku as my daughter starting today, he said in a proud tone as Haku's eyes widened to the size of saucers. Zabuza-sama, she said, her eyes never leaving him as he gained an irritated twitch of his eyebrow before he knocked her on the head gently. You idiot, didn't you hear what I just said? Don't call me Zabuza-sama anymore. Just call me. Call me Tan or something. Just not Zabuza-sama. Zabuza said, turning his head away, crossing his arms as a light dusting of pink colored his cheeks. Anko snickering at him. Oh wow, looks like the big bad demon of the hidden mist is sheared. To which Satsuki and Yukumo turned their heads away to stop their impending laughter as Zabuza gained a bit more pink from embarrassment, growling a little. Unable to hold it in any longer, Haku latched onto Zabuza as tears started to fall down her face as a beautiful smile appeared. Oh, of course, Zabu. I mean, Tatan, Haku exclaimed. The happiness in her heart, surpassing anything that she's ever felt. After things settled down and all the paperwork had been filed away, Minato told the two that they were going to be under suspension and supervision from an ambush squad for an unknown period of time, to which they accepted, knowing that it was justified given their backgrounds. Now that everything is settled, where will the two of you be staying? Minato asked, and immediately they froze. The reason they joined God was that they would have gotten paid a large sum on money, having exhausted the last of their funds prior to being hired. In other words, they didn't have the funds to rent out a place to stay. But the two didn't have to fear as Naruto stepped in and offered them a place in his apartment to the shock of everyone present. They can stay with me, Hokage-sama. My apartment has plenty of room, and I'm not only any of it, Naruto said, knowing that he did indeed have the space to spare. Are you sure, brat? I don't want to intrude or want you to feel obligated to give us a place to stay just because you brought us here. You know, Zabuza said, not wanting to be a bigger burden on the person who just gave him a new lease on life. Tuan is right. Naruto-kun, we don't want to intrude. Haku said, blushing slightly, though part of her did want to stay with the blonde who did so much for her and her father. Unknown to her, the two other girls behind her twitched when they heard the part and saw her blush. It's no trouble at all, you two. My apartment is a decent size, having 2 bathrooms and 3 bedrooms. I've taken the smallest of the 3 and the other 2 are just collecting dust. Nar replied once again, winning the two over with his argument. Minato wanted to object, but knowing the inevitable outcome, he opted to keep quiet and smile, though he felt slight envy for the two that would be living with his son just like he used to. After about an hour, everything was settled and Minato dismissed everyone except his son. Seeing as he was probably going to be questioned, he gave Zabuza and Haku a spare key and told them where his apartment was, saying that he would see them later. After bidding farewells with everyone, he faced his father who had a longing look on his face. Nar remained quiet as the atmosphere started to turn awkward at least for Minato. The lull of the moment was finally broken when Minato asked why Nar was suspecting him of since he was asked to stay behind. Nar, is it true? Minato asked in a soft tone of voice. As what true Hokage-sama? Naruto replied, his eyes and voice back to their original states of navy and deadpan. The strength that your team Zabuza-san and Haku-chan witnessed. Are you really that strong? Why do you need to know Hokage-sama besides that fact that it would shed some light about myself? Nar replied, obviously not pleased with the question. I need to know Nar. So please just answer me yes or no. Minato asked, his eyes pleading Naruto to answer him. Finally, Nar relented, heaving out an annoyed sigh. He shook his head in the positive, making Minato widen his eyes. Then why, Naro? Why hide your strength? Minato asked, unable to comprehend the reasoning behind his son's decision to put on the facade of being the dead last. Because it's much easier that way. Hey Sama, I don't like being the center of attention and even more I have some reasons that I can't tell you. Nar replied, Minato giving him a small smile. Are you going to drop your facade in the village now? He asked hoping that his son would knowing that it would get him more contact with the other ninja and villagers. I don't know, Hokage-sama. Well see. With that, Minato nodded, knowing that he was probably driving his son's patience with him. Before he left the office, Minato said one more thing. I'm glad that you're not hurt, Nar. And welcome home, he said in a soft tone, pausing slightly at the door. Nar replied before he left. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Nar replied before he closed the door softly. Scene change. Naruto's apartment. Arriving at his apartment, Zabuza and Haku were a little puzzled why he would live so far from the village center. But then they noticed that there were no other houses or complexes within at least 100 meters, and there was a training ground directly across road. From the front, it looked like a fairly well-kept building. There was no real damage or decay visible to the eye. A plain gray, it wasn't the most eye-catching, but it did look nice. Making their way up to the second floor, they noticed that it seemed like there weren't any other occupants of the building besides Nar, the dust that had covered the top and bottoms of the doors a clear indicator that they haven't been opened in quite some time. As they made their way to the end of the floor, they saw small gardening and planters boxes hanging on the handrail in front of the door of the apartment that belonged to Nar. The two were surprised to see that the blonde had a rather serene hobby, seeing that he seemed like the type to not have any interest in such mundane things. Making their way to the door, they opened it up and the gray from the outside disappeared and was replaced with a clean and calming white. The apartment was like he said, being rather spacious for only one person. Quickly scanning around the room as they entered, they noticed that it was spotless, not seeing anything that was out of place or dirty. Taking their sandals off and placing them in the shoe storage that rested near the front door, they continued to explore their new place of residence. The living room had a black couch with pillows and black armchair overlooking a television, a black coffee table resting in the center of the room with white coasters on it. In the corner sat a black and white bookshelf filled with various kinds of literature, books, scrolls, and magazines. Spread through the room were lamps that matched the walls with white shades covering them, another lamp hanging overhead above the table. Making their way into the kitchen, they saw that it had a countertop that overlooked the living room, giving whoever was in the kitchen a clear view of what went on in the living room. Entering it, they saw that it was relatively simple. A black marble countertop, a sink and disposal unit, a stove and oven unit, a refrigerator, a microwave, a coffee maker, a dishwasher, a garbage can. The cabinet under the sink contained cleaning supplies such as extra dish soap and paper towels. The cabinets above the countertop contained various ingredients in one and snacks or instant meals like ramen in the other. It was pretty standard for what it contained, though it had a window in front of the sink that had a beautiful view of the village, another gardening box hanging in front of it filled with various herbs for cooking such as thyme and rosemary. Leaving the kitchen, they entered the hallway and saw that there were 6 rooms lining either side of it and 1 in the back. 3 on the left side and 3 on the right. Walking to the 3 on the right, they discovered that the first door was a storage closet containing extra shampoo, conditioner, detergent, and various other cleaning products. The 2 after were the bathrooms, which were again very standard, a sink, cabinet, towel rack, and shower being what stocked it, though the bathroom of the far right had a tub, as well as being slightly larger. The rooms on the right were the bedrooms. The rooms furthest to the back of the hallway were empty, having a simple setup of a bed, closet, dresser, and drawer. The first one closeted to the entrance of the hallway belonged to Nar. They were nervous at first, but then they opened the door to his room. His room was very plain, the setup from the other rooms being present, though they did see that it was smaller than the other 2 rooms. There were no posters on the wall, nothing that really differentiated it from the other rooms other than a small bookshelf and laundry hamper that sat near the closet. Closing the door, they made their way to the final door at the end of the hallway and saw that it was a washer and dryer. Whistling slightly, Zabuza couldn't help but admire his new place of residence. After deciding which room would be his, he eventually took the room furthest from the hallway. After coaxing from Haku, setting his kubiki against the wall, he pulled out a storage scroll that contained his belonging and started sorting out and organizing his new room. After he finished sorting his belonging, he grabbed his worn clothes and took them to start washing them. In contrast to her father, Haku lopped onto her bed and savored the soft feeling of the mattress, her smiling from having a home never leaving her face. Spending a few minutes like this, she eventually got up and began organizing her room as well. But hearing her father begin washing his clothes, she opted to take a shower first. Making her way to the bathroom, she greeted her father with a smile, which he returned before going back to his laundry. Entering the bathroom, she opened up the cabinet and pulled out a towel before enjoying her first bath after a few months of having to bathe in rivers and lakes, practically melting when the warm embrace of the water took hold of her. After washing herself, Haku soaked in the tub for nearly half an hour before she got out. Time skip 1 hour later. After the 2 had finished what they were doing, Zabuza taking a shower and Haku doing her own laundry, they made their way to the living room to hear the door open and see a familiar head of blonde hair carrying a bag of groceries. "Ah, Naruto, welcome home, heir, or excuse the intrusion." Haku happily greeted, but soon meekly apologized, rather ashamed and embarrassed that she acted like this was already her home, while Zabuza laughed behind her. "Hey there, brat. That meeting took longer than I expected. Anything serious come up?" Zabuza asked, slightly concerned that the blonde got in trouble for sticking his neck out for them. "Hello, Zabuza-san Haku-san. No, there was no trouble. Hokage-sama just wanted to discuss a few things with me. There is nothing the 2 of you need to worry about," he replied, taking off his sandals and slipping them into the storage box next to Haku's. "Well, that's good. And again, I have to say, thanks, brat. You really stuck your neck out for us," Zabuza said. And he and Haku bowed slightly, though they were told to quickly stop bowing. "You 2 don't need to bow to me. I only did what I thought was right," Naruto said, making his way towards the kitchen to start on dinner. "Well, now that we'll be living together, why don't we do our best to get along?" Haku chirped happily as Zabuza smiled, seeing his daughter radiate happiness that he's never seen since he picked her up all those years ago. "I agree, but I'll tell you something right now," Zabuza said in a serious tone, earning the attention of both Naruto and Haku. "What is it, Zabuza-san?" Nar said, nodding his head at the serious tone that the man had. As Haku grew nervous, not knowing what was going on. "If you even think about peeping on Haku, I'll destroy you," he said, his face scary serious. After saying that, an out-of-place wind blew as the 2 other occupants of the room gained confused looks. That is until Haku turned bright red at what her father was saying. "Toten, what are you saying?" She shouted, not believing that he would say something like that so bluntly. But he wasn't paying attention to her as he folded his arms and stared directly into Naruto's eyes. We both know that my Haku is a very beautiful girl, probably the most beautiful girl. Don't think that just because you gave us a new life and a place to stay that you have free reign to make her yours. It'll be a cold day in hell before I give you permission to date my daughter Brat. Zabuza said with a fatherly fierceness that was like no other, causing Haku to blush even deeper from embarrassment. Tou-san, she screamed, hitting him on the head as she flailed her arms, not believing that he could embarrass her like this in front of their new roommate, while he continued saying that she was way too young to be thinking about dating and kissing, to which she screamed even more out of indignation before she covered her face and ran to her room. Zabuza, panicking and confused, running behind her to figure out why she acted like she did. Hearing Zabuza pound of the door, asking or rather begging Haku to let him in while told him to go away. Naruto simply turned to the countertop and started preparing dinner. A small smile appearing on his face from the antics of his new roommates. Looks like things are going to be a little more lively around here. Night quickly fell after Team 12 with Zabuza and Haku returned to Konoha. After the incident earlier involving Zabuza and Haku, the two were sitting with Naruto in the living having dinner while they watched the news, discussing various things such as Naruto's connection to the Hokage. After the two learned that Naruto was his son, they questioned him as to why he wasn't staying with family and instead living alone. They got their answer when Nar told them that he didn't want much to do with that family anymore, saying that it was something personal. The two respecting his privacy and turning the topic over to what was going to happen in the future. Scene change, Uzumaki Namikaze Estate. After he finished the workload for the day, Minato returned home strangely lethargic in contrast to his almost tireless normal self. When he returned, he was greeted by the smiling faces of his children and the trademark eye smile of his student, Kakashi. Taking off his sandals, he was tackled by the Red Rocket that was his wife, who fussed over him and immediately questioned him as to why he seemed much more tired than usual, getting curious looks from their children and a concerned one from Kakashi. Mina, what's wrong? Did something happen today? Are you feeling all right? Kasha asked her husband, checking him for any signs of damage or fatigue. Tu-san here. Sit down. I'll go get you some tea, Midito said, taking her father's hand and leading him to the armchair nearby as she went to fetch a cup of tea. Minato-sensei, what's troubling you? I've never seen you like this before. Did something happen today during in the tower to cause you trouble? If so, I can personally go and take care of it. Kakashi said, slightly angry that someone might have done something to cause his sensei trouble. Tu-san, you can tell us, right? Narumi asked, her eyes looking worriedly at her father. Yatu-san. Just tell me and I'll go take of them with Kakashi. Menma declared, getting a head nod from Kakashi. Returning with a cup of tea, Midito handed it to her father as her family gathered around him to see what was the reason behind his odd behavior. Once they saw him drink his tea, then release a sigh. They leaned in. Team 12 came back from their mission. Minato said as looks of confusion quickly plastered the faces of his family and Kakashi. Seeing that they most likely forgotten, he rephrased his previous statement. Naruto's team came back from their mission. Once those words left his mouth, he was immediately pounced upon by Kusha, who demanded to know what happened. What? He came back just today. Kusha shouted, shaking her husband by the collar of his flak jacket. Eventually, she was pried off by her daughters, who also looked like they were going to do the same thing to their father. Yes, Kusha. I didn't think that it would take the long to finish a C-rank mission either. But Minato trailed off, getting nervous looks from Kusha and his daughters. But what to? Narumi asked, gravely worried that something might have happened to her beloved brother. That C-rank mission turned into an A- rank. That bombshell caused everyone in the room to freeze as their eyes widened. What did you say, sensei? Kakashi asked, not believing what he heard was correct. He knew that Anko was gunning to get done with dank missions so that her genin could get more experience, but this he didn't believe it. I'm not joking. They encountered the Demon Brothers as well as Zabuza Mamochi, a former member of the 7 Ninja Swordsmen of the Mist, within the first few hours of departing. At that, Kusha couldn't hold herself back any longer. She demanded to know what happened during the mission. What Minato told them they couldn't believe. His Lee living wi with high him. Kusha managed to stutter out, her eyes wide with fear. Minato had told them that Nar fought Zabuza to a standstill and then took on an army of hired ninja and mercenaries and won. Then he told them about what happened earlier today about Zabuza and Haku joining the village and staying with Naruto. Am I Minato? Ho, how could you let something like that happen? You let that monster stay with our baby without anyone to protect him. She nearly screamed, her eyes never losing the terrified look that were held in them. Though Minato managed to calm her down by telling her about the way that Naruto had insisted that they stay with him, to her horror and the closeness that they seemed to have. As he described the interactions between two, Kosa could see the envy clear on his face when he told her that they seemed like very close friends. After he finished his tale, Kusha, Mina, and Narumi felt envy flood their hearts when they heard that Naruto had practically a new family. However, Narumi and Midito's envy ran much deeper than what Kusha felt. While their mother felt envy that Naro was living with other people, which they too felt envious about, more of their envy stemmed from the fact that there was a girl their age living with their beloved brother, and the thought made a lump of cold ice form in the pits of their stomachs, as the fear that she would snatch their older brother for her own made the two extremely nervous and worried. While his sisters felt envy, Menma was still in disbelief, unable to wrap his head around the fact that the weak older brother he had always known did something like that, surviving and completing an A-rank mission not even 2 months into his career as a ninja. It should have been him who went on the mission, beat Zabuza, fought an army, and saved a nation, not him. It infuriated him to no end, his hands clenched into tight fists. He was definitely a much more capable shinobi than him. And yet he was still stuck here doing chores. Soon the night was filled with the clamoring of Kusha and her daughters as they planned to go and save their son and brother. But they were quickly told not to by Minato, who said it wouldn't go well with Nar. Though reluctant at first, they eventually gave in, not wanting their son and brother to hate them even more than he did now. The house settled into an eerie calm as the members of the household went back to what they were doing. Kusha and Midito quietly making dinner. Narumi setting the table, Menma watching TV, Kakashi reading his book, and Minato showering. Though the energy that they had from earlier had disappeared, time skipped 1 week later. A week had passed since Team 12 returned to Konoha and the reveal of Zabuza and Haku's new status as citizens of Konoha. At first, as was expected, a majority of the village avoided the two outsiders given the reputation that they had built up. But now they were beginning to be accepted in some parts of the village, namely the section of the village that catered to ninja. After 4 days of observation by the Anbu, a mental and physical checkup, Minato deemed that the two were fit to be ninja under the service of Konoha. They were surprised by the relatively quick decision, expecting to be under surveillance for at least 2 weeks. And when they asked why he gave them the trust reserved only for trusted ninja, Minato simply said that if his son trusted them, then he would as well, which they happily accepted, thanking Naruto once again. Once they were given their headbands, Minato had them evaluated by his top jonin to see where they stood as ninja, though it was mostly to gauge Haku as he knew that Zabuza was at least jonin level, if not Anbu. After they finished their evaluation, Minato happily gave Zabuza the rank of jonin and Haku the rank of chunin, the two grateful for their positions. While they were happy that they gained the trust of their new cage, they were more happy that they could actually help Naruto with paying rent and paying for supplies even if he insisted that they didn't have to. They wanted to, which forced his hand, as he relented after they told him of their new positions. Once that was settled, they began their lives as ninja of Konoha. For Zabuza, he was pretty much avoided by nearly everyone. The only ones he ever being seen with were Naruto and his daughter. But that changed one day when Inko invited him to meet with a few of her friends, which he reluctantly agreed after some pressuring from his daughter. Flashback 2 days ago, an hour before he was going to meet up with Anko and her friends, Zabuza was laying face down on the couch, not looking forward to spending the day with a bunch of chummy leaf ninja while he's the third wheel, just awkwardly being there. He was dressed in a black sleeveless shirt and matching pants, black and white stripped arm warmers that went to his elbows and leg warmers that connected to his sandals that went to his knees, his regular pair of black sandals. His headband was made with a long black cloth and was tied sideways like his old one. The bandages normally worn around his mouth undone and just wrapped around his neck. He topped off his outfit off with the green flak jacket of a Konoha ninja. As he was moping, he didn't notice Haku until he heard her clear her throat. Lifting his head and looking at his daughter, Haku winced seeing the empty look in her father's normally cool and calm eyes. From his expression alone, she knew that he wasn't looking forward to what was going to happen in the next few hours. Kneeling down in front of him on the couch, Haku put her hands on his cheeks as she stared into his eyes, her own filled with sadness. Chu-san, please don't look like that. I don't like it when you're not the strong person that I know and love. I'll contact Enkoan and cancel the meeting, so please don't be like that anymore, okay? Haku said, her sad eyes ever leaving her father's now bewildered ones. Seeing and hearing the heart-wrenching eyes and voice of his daughter, Zabuza immediately snapped himself out of his pitiful state. Putting his hand on top of her head, he gave her a small smile before he sat back up before speaking to her. Sorry about that, Haku. I was being pathetic. Your old man isn't going to stand down that easily, right? Zabuza said, the empty look in his eyes replaced with the calm flames of determination. Seeing her father snap out of his depressive state, Haku beamed him a happy smile as he returned it, ruffling her hair gently. Once the moment was over, and they were back to their normal selves, they went to sit at the kitchen countertop as they happily talked about what was happening with the other around the village, stopping once the deadline had appeared. Well, I'm off then, Haku. Wish me luck, Zabuza said after heaving out a sigh as his daughter cheered him on. Her words of encouragement sparking the fatherly flame inside of him alive, making him stand up straighter and gain an unshakable aura of confidence. Haku's eyes sparkled at the sight of her father looking so cool and confident. After composing himself, Zabuza walked through the door, his head held high. Go get them too, San. Haku cheered, pumping her fist in the air as he turned around and gave her a smile before heading to the small tea shop that was the meeting place. Scene change. Ensu tea house in the bustling yet calm shop. Enko sitting with her group of friends that she's had since her academy days. Sitting around a large table in a private room in a separate wing of the shop that they reserved. She was seated with Shizune, Karini, Yugao, Tsububaki, Kagura, Genma, Hayate, Ama, Katetsu, Amo, and Aoba. Joking loudly and laughing, the men were talking about things that were somewhat distasteful in the opinion of the ladies present, mostly about women in a certain orange-colored book. Kami and Hayate, don't be such a stiff. You got to at least give it a read once, Katu said, patting the now pink-shaked man on the back. You know you want you. You're not the first pure that hasn't read Jerry Sama's book. And you won't be the last. So take your first steps into manhood. Amo added, also patting his shoulder. Watching the other men start to put pressure on her. Hayate, Yugao decided to remind them about the only one was allowed to do that. Hayate, you know what will happen if I find you reading that trash, right? She said in a syrupy sweet voice that sent shivers down the spines of the man in question especially. Yugao-chan, you know, I don't have any interest in reading those books. Hayate fiercely denied before he started coughing heavily, his lover and friends quickly checking to see if he was alright. I am fine, everyone. Thank you for your concern. Hadsama still hasn't found a cure, but she has lessened the pain greatly. Hayate said with a smile, trying to reassure the group that his condition was better than it was in the past. Soon, the group fell back into a happy atmosphere. The serious moment melted away as soon as Yuga started feeding Hayate. Much to his embarrassment, prompting the women to coo at the two, while the men looked away, tears falling from their eyes at their own hopelessness in the battle for love. But the light and happy atmosphere ended when a staff member told them that there was a man in the front who said that he was to meet with them. Turning their heads to Anko, they saw that she had a sheepish grin on her face, telling them that she had invited Zabuza to meet and hang out with them. Ignoring the shocked looks on the faces of her friends, Anko told the staff member to let in him. When he got to the tea shop, he was surprised to say the least. It was busier than he expected, and it even served sake judging from the smell of it that wafted around. Sighing to himself, he took a step inside and was immediately greeted with tense and nervous stares, which he noticed, but ignored, not concerned with any of them. Looking around, he didn't see a sign of the purple-haired woman that had invited him to come. So, he figured that he was early, much to his disdain. Letting out another sigh, he made his way to the counter, only to bump into someone, causing them to spill their tea on him. Kaori Yu wasn't having the greatest day. She had taken care of multiple genin who had the displeasure of catching Tora, the cat of the fire dose wife who turned them into scratching posts. But above that, she just turned 28 and still had nothing to really show for it. While all her friends had boyfriends, and a few were even engaged, she was still living the single life. She was so immersed in her own sulking that she never noticed the man in front of her until she bumped into him, spilling her tea on him. Goo! Zabuza cried out, his forearm being scaled slightly from the hot tea that was spilled on him. Ah! Oh my! I'm so sorry, Kaori called out quickly, wiping the spilled tea off with a towel that a staff member handed to her. After the whole incident was over, the staff bringing a first aid kit for the man, Kaori got a better look at him. Once she did, she froze. The man that she spilled tea on was Zabuza Mamochi, the demon of the hidden mist. Unable to form a coherent sentence, she just stuttered when he locked gazes with her. Ah, you all right? Zabuza said, dropping at the terrified woman in front of him. While she continued to stutter, he noticed that she had scalded herself a little bit on her hand. Reaching out, he grabbed her wrist as she stopped stuttering and froze. What do I do? What do I do? He's going to kill me. Core screamed in her head. She had just spilled hot tea on a person who was a master of silent killing. She knew that she was dead. The other customers and staff members could only watch in silence, expecting the worst. However, their imaginations of a bloody murder vanished when Zabuza turned her hand over and started applying some ointment to help with her burn. What? Kaori could only ask, dumbfounded by what just happened. He didn't rip her hand off or threaten to kill her. He actually put burn ointment on her instead. There, that should do it. You should be all right now. I didn't notice any other places that got scalded. Zabuza said, finishing tending to the woman. Silence. The once bustling and lively shop immediately stopped. Everyone trying to process what just happened. The former Kiri Nin and missing Nin, the demon of the hidden mist, Zabuza Mamochi, just tended to a beautiful lady that had just spilled hot tea on him like it was nothing. Snapping out of her stupor, Kaori could only look at him, never noticing that there was a slight fluttery feeling in her chest when he looked at her with a little bit of concern in his eyes. Did I grab your wrist too hard? Sorry about that. I'm not really used to the whole taking care of people thing, he said, clearly embarrassed from the way everyone was gawking at him. Finally, Kaori managed to find her voice after a few seconds of awkwardness. Yua and no, and not at all. I am just a little surprised is all. Yo, you're a lot more different than what the rumors say you are. Kaori said, a little bit of pink invading her cheeks. After hearing her say that, Zabuza could only laugh. The act causing some people to drop their tea. It wasn't a bloodthirsty laugh, but a humorous one that was also quite charming, as some of the women were blushing slightly after hearing it. Don't worry about it. I get that a lot nowadays, Zabuza said, brushing off the comment. Offering her his hand, he helped her up, then kneeled back down to pick up the broken pieces of the cup, putting them into the towel from earlier. Finishing cleaning up the small spill, he handed the towel in shards to a waitress who flushed a little when he gave her an easygoing smile before taking it into the kitchen. Finished with the incident, Zabuza bid farewell to Kaori before making his way to the counter and ordering himself a cup of tea. Kaori could only stare at his retreating back before she smiled and headed back to her shift at the hospital. The man known as Zabuza Mochi never leaving her mind for the rest of the day, getting his tea from the same waitress from earlier. He blew on it slightly before taking a sip and smiling slightly. It's good, was all he said before indulging himself more with the tea that he ordered. The waitress blushing again before she quickly excused herself. Finishing his tea, he put his cup down before asking the manager if Anko was present in the shop, to which he said yes, but questioned him as to what his business was with them. Once he told the man that she had invited him to tea, nodded before asking him to follow as he lead him to a separate wing of the shop. Once they reached a door that laughs could be heard behind. Zabuza winced knowing that once they saw him it had instantly turned as quiet as a graveyard. His premonition was correct when it did instantly turn as quiet as a graveyard. Ayo, Zabuza said lamely, raising his hand up to greet the group in an attempt to break the ice and lighten the mood, which failed to do either as they didn't respond. That is until Inko did. Hey, about time you got here. I thought you chickened out, Anko said, obviously trying to rile up Zabuza, which worked. Oi, you calling me chicken? Zabuza retorted, his brow twitching, but realizing what he did, he quickly composed himself as Anko gestured him to sit beside her. The light atmosphere from before didn't return as the other members of the group just stared at Zabuza for a few minutes before quietly conversing with each other, ignoring the fact that Zabuza had just joined them. He sighed as he knew this would happen. After 15 minutes of being ignored, he finally had enough of the situation as he stood up to excuse himself, but was immediately stopped when Anko grabbed his wrist. Anko couldn't believe what she was seeing. Even after he got approval from the Hokage himself, they still didn't trust him. She knew that at first that would have been acceptable, but it had been days since he was accepted into their ranks. They should trust a person that their cage trusted. Are you guys idiots? She suddenly shouted, stunning the other occupants of the room. I get that you guys don't trust him or like him, but to just flat out ignore him. That's not something that I expected you guys to do. I expected a few minutes of awkward silence followed by someone offering him something to drink, then starting a conversation. Not for you idiots to just pretend like he isn't here. Anko said, making the eyes of her friends widen, nod, believing that they were being lectured by her of all people. She was about to continue but was stopped when Zabuza pulled his wrist free from her grip. Oi Midarashi, don't make em do something they don't want to do. They don't trust me and I'm fine with that. I got other people who trust me, including Hokage-sama, Haku, and Naruto. Having other people not trust me isn't something I really care about, he said, making his way to the door as the others looked at him, their eyes wide. Stopping at the door, he addressed them once more before leaving. Like I said, I'm fine with you not trusting me. My daughter told me that I should try and find people that I could trust with my back, but figures that ain't happening, huh? Well, whatever. But just to reassure you right now, if we work together, I've got your back covered whether you want me to or not. I owe Naruto that much for sticking his neck out for me when Hokage-sama questioned my loyalty. I owe Haku that much for sticking with me for as long as she did and always worrying for my sake. And I owe Hokage-sama that much for accepting me and my daughter into this village and allowing us to become ninja. Thanks for the invite, Midarashi. I'll see you around. With that, Zabuza left, closing the door softly behind him. Once the door closed, silence prevailed over the room, everyone digesting the words that Zabuza had left them. After a few moments, Enko stood up, her eyes foreshadowed by her hair. You guys, I just can't believe you, Enko whispered before she made her way to the door. Enko-chan, where are you going? Kurana asked, still not believing that her normally exuberant best friend was actually upset to this extent. I'm going to find Zabuza and apologize for what happened, she said as she exited the room, leaving everyone else who looked down at the table. Quote. She's really upset. Enko's really upset, Kurana said, still in disbelief at the fact that her best friend got upset over what happened. Were we wrong? Tsububaki said, questioning if their choice of action was the right one. I don't know, Tsubaki. I don't feel like I can trust him. You know that he killed all of the graduating of his academy without him even being a ninja in the first place. Do you think you can trust someone who did something like that? Asuma said, taking a long gulp of sake. The rest of the group remained quiet, not having any other words to say as the happy and light atmosphere from earlier destroyed in its place a heavy and solemn one. Scene change a few blocks from Ensu Tea House. After he left the room, he bid farewell to the manager and staff members of the tea house, smiling at them, which stunned them, but they quickly recovered and returned the gesture. The waitress from before introduced herself as Okukusho and asked if he was going to return, giving him a coupon for half-off tea and a meal, which Zabuza gratefully accepted, telling her that he would return some other time. As he rounded the corner, intent on grabbing something light to eat, he was stopped by a hand on his shoulder. Making a fist, he was about to smash his elbow into the person when he stopped himself, knowing that he'd probably be the one to be arrested. Those thoughts left when he turned around and saw a familiar head of purple hair. What are you doing here, Midarashi? Shouldn't you still be with your friends? He asked, confused as to why she left her friends to stop him. But then a thought came to his head as he gave her a smirk. Don't tell me you were worried about me, he said with an amused tone, his eyes also shining with an amused glint. Hearing him say that, Enko immediately turned red with both embarrassment and anger. Shush, shut up, you idiot. It's not like I was worried about you or anything, it's just that no one should have had what happened back there happen to them, even an idiot like you, she said. The redness never leaving her face. The opposite happened when Zabuza started laughing hysterically, clutching at his sides in order to ease the pain that he felt. Ha ha. Oh, Kami, that's rich. Was such a line, it's not even funny. He laughed. Tears began flowing from his eyes, not believing that the snake mistress of Konoha was a sonner. Oh Kami, my sides, they burn, he cried out, now on his knees, one hand on the ground, supporting him, the other wrapped around his stomach, trying to ease the pain, tears still falling as he continued to laugh. Quote. Enko's face was crimson now, her cheeks puffed into an angry pout. Finally, having had enough of seeing Zabuza make fun of her, she launched herself at him, getting him into a headlock. Just die already, she screamed as he just started laughing harder at her futile attempt to make him submit. The antics of the two eventually drew a large crowd. At first, they were terrified at the scene, but then they started smiling and laughing themselves. After some time, even the group of Anbu who came to check out the disturbance couldn't help but smirk and contain the laughter that welled up inside of them, never imagining seeing Enko and the demon of the hidden mist act like two lovers. Eventually, the two calmed down, Zabuza sitting with his legs outstretched, wiping the remaining tears away while Enko still had him in a headlock. Finally collecting himself, he turned his head towards Enko, who still was red in the face as she snarled at him. But she wasn't prepared when Zabuza closed his eyes and gave her a wide smile, making her eyes go wide and her heart flutter. Thanks, Midarashi. That really cheered me up, he said as he pulled Enko's arms off his neck as he stood up, helping her up as well. Still slightly stunned, she was broken out of her state when she heard applause explode around her. You go, girl. Great job cheering your boyfriend up. Ka, you two are so cute. It must be great to be young and in love. She's a keeper, brother. That line was perfect. She's the one. Don't ever let her go. Immediately, the two froze when the crowd started cheering them on, shouting about how they were a couple and about how in love they were. Hearing what they were saying about them, the two immediately turned crimson before they took off, leaving a cheering crowd and amused Anbu squad behind. Scene change. A few blocks from the incident. After their escape, Zabuza and Anko found themselves in the other food district. However, both of them were still embarrassed from earlier. The awkward silence that prevailed was broken when both of their stomachs growled. They both looked at each other before they started laughing. Haha, want to grab something to eat? Mimochi, Anko said, a smile appearing on her face. Sure, why not? Mitsu and Rashi, Zabuza said in an amused tone, barely able to contain the laughter that returned as Anko turned red once more, her eye twitching, but soon the two laughed once more and entered a small yakitori stand where they learned more about each other, learning that Zabuza loved spicy food and fresh fish, disliked sweets and hated fresh vegetables, learning that Anko loved sweet bean soup, dango and practically anything sweet, disliked fish and hated spicy food. As they happily chatted with one another, they never noticed the knowing looks that the other patrons and cook gave them. After a while, they were soon joined by Ibiki, who got instantly along great with Zabuza, forging a bond of manliness, as they called it, that made Anko laugh. The three enjoyed each other's company until the shop closed, agreeing with the others that it would be their new spot to hang out. Flashback. And after that, Zabuza became close friends with Anko and Ibiki, who introduced him to Enonoi, Tombo, Shimon, and the other members of the TNI division, who at first were cautious of him, but quickly turned around when Ibiki told them that he was a great guy. Due to the events that happened that day, many missed, or rather assumed that Zabuza and Anko were a couple, which infuriated and embarrassed the two to no end. Haku especially was affected by the rumors. Zabuza had seen the most terrifying expression he had ever witnessed when she told him that no woman was allowed to have her father unless she accepted them first, wearing a yandere-like smile as she unconsciously pulled out a handful of sunbanon, making him shiver in fear. As for Haku, at first she was also treated similar to how Zabuza was treated. But once she started to get to know the villagers who she bought groceries from, her reputation as a beautiful and kind girl quickly spread through the village, earning her a fan club, much to her chagrin. Luckily for her, Zabuza scared off any boy who even stared in her direction. His only like aura springing out whenever he caught some boy staring at his daughter. Zabuza returned to that tea shop, much to the joy of the staff there, having grown to like the intimidating yet deceptively kind man. OK even had asked him if he was single, which he told her yes, making her eyes sparkle before she skipped off in a happier mood than before, much to his confusion. Eventually, he started doing missions with various people as well as being solo, making him a happier man, as he was allowed the freedom that he once had unlimited access to once more. Haku eventually was accepted to the medical corps and immediately became a vital member. Her knowledge of the human body and numerous herbs, making her a valuable member. Adding to that was her kind nature, making all the patients that were admitted feel welcomed and safe. That is until a young man tried hitting on her, resulting in him being temporarily paralyzed from the neck down while she wore her smile in an ominous way. That was where the unspoken rule of never hitting on her was created. For the two, life definitely was much more enjoyable than it was in the past. The two smiling much more and laughing much more than they ever had before. Time skipped 2 weeks later. As time flew by, things mostly remained the same. Zabuza was apologized to by the same group of people that Anko had tried to introduce to him, which he brushed off, saying that they were only doing what ninja did. Haku's fan club grew in size, and in turn, Zabuza's overprotectiveness grew as well. Though Zabuza's popularity with some of the female population also triggered Haku's overprotectiveness, as she would smile chillingly at any woman caught staring and blushing at her father. For Team 12, not much had changed. Minato had ordered that they not be allowed to go on any missions for at least 2 weeks, which they accepted, opting to train more. Anko told them that there would be no team training, but would be a meeting a week until the Chunin exams and to take it easy, telling them that she would help them train if they asked for it. Yukumo trained with Anko and Kurana on her taijutsu, enjutsu, and genjutsu. Kurenai was shocked when Yukumo came back a much stronger girl than she was before. Showing strength that she never had imagined would come from the once frail girl. Pride swelled in the hearts of both women when they saw the growth that their student was showing. The frail girl of the past replaced with a strong young lady who strived to be stronger than the both of them. Satsuki trained with her mother, father, and older brother in controlling and using her sharing, which once they found out about, they promptly celebrated. At first, she was confident that she was able to control it without trouble, but was proven wrong when she nearly fainted from draining so much char. While her parents and older brother were happy for her, her twin glared at her much more harshly than before, obliviously jealous and angry that she had awakened her sharing before he did. As for Nar, since he wasn't allowed on missions, he never went into the village as Haku offered to do the shopping, which helped him avoid all contact with his family. Instead, he trained following Ryuha's instructions as well as sparring with Zabuza, much to the older man's pleasure. Zabuza sparred with him once a week, and every time they sparred, he was blown away by the growth that Nar displayed, not believing that anyone could grow so much in such little time. He also found out that using a great sword wasn't the only weapon that Nar excelled at using, stunning him once he saw the extensive range of weaponry proficiency that he had. However, they were blown away with what Anko had to tell them at the team meeting that was scheduled for today. Scene change. Team 12 training ground. Hey there, BRZ. How have you all been? Anko cheerfully said, getting smiles in response from her genin. Even Naruto had a small smile. Seeing the smiling faces of them, Anko gave a grin in response. Well, these past 3 weeks have been pretty boring, huh? Just training without doing any missions. But hey, I've got something important to tell you all. Once Anko said that, she straightened her back and stared at them with serious eyes. In response, they became serious as well, their smiles thinning into lines as they returned her serious gaze. After all I've seen you do, even though you haven't even been Janine for half a year, I've decided to ask you all if you want to enter the Chunin exams this year, Anko said, her gaze never losing the serious look in them. What did you say? Anko-sensei. Yukumo said, her eyes wide. Usually genin were supposed to have at least a year of experience before they were eligible to enter the exams, but their sensei was telling them that they could enter if they wanted. I said, if you guys think you're ready and you're prepared to give it your all, I'll allow you to enter this year's Chunin exams. Anko repeated once more. Say sensei. I want to enter. Satsuki said, her eyes burning with determination. I agree, Anko sensei. I want to enter as well. Yukumo agreed, her eyes burning with the same determination as her best friend. The girls were rearing to go, but the lone male of the group remained silent, prompting his teammates to look at him for his answer. Quote, enter was his answer. His eyes gaining a determined look as well, expecting their sensei to give them a grin and celebrate. They were shocked when her serious look remained. You all know that the Chunin exams are dangerous, right? You're allowed to kill, maim, do anything to your opponent in order to win. I don't want you all to charge head first without knowing that you have the potential to die and for it to be allowed. Knowing that, do you still want to enter? Anko replied, her eyes never once losing the serious look in them. Yukumo and Satsuki looked at their feet, mulling over their hasty decision. Their flames were dampened a bit, but they were revived when Naruto spoke out his thoughts. Don't worry, Anko-sensei. If we enter, I'll do everything in my power to protect my teammates, he said. His eyes gaining an even more confident look in them, making the others widen their eyes slightly. Even knowing that it's dangerous, as long as my team is there to back me up, I know that we'll pass, Satsuki said, standing up straight as she regained her determined look. With Satsuki and Naruto standing beside me, I know that we'll overcome anything that stands in our way, Yukumo said with her eyes also gaining her determination back. Seeing her, genin have not just confidence in themselves, but confidence in each other. Anko finally lost her serious look and in its place, a proud smile shone brightly. That's the right answer, you guys. Alone, I know that all of you could get far into the exams, but together. Well, let's just say I feel sorry for the poor suckers that are going to cross paths with you. Anko said laughing lightly as her genin also laughed along. After everything was settled, Anko handed her students the paperwork which they quickly filled out and returned to her. Bidding farewell to them, she quickly made her way to the Hogue Tower where Minato had called a meeting with all the sensei of the year's genin to see who was going to enter the exams this year. Scene change. Hogue's tower in the meeting room, adjacent to his main office. Minato was seated in front of the jonin in charge of this year's crop of genin. He knew that some of them who were going to enter their genin had the usual year amount of experience, but he also knew that some wanted to enter their genin and didn't have that usual requirement for those teams. He wanted a very good explanation as to why they should be able to enter when they lacked the necessary experience. As they were about to begin, the door opened up and Anko entered the room a little winded from her sprint to the tower. Sweat dropping at her tardiness, being even later than Kakashi, much to his chagrin, she apologized before taking a place next to Kurana. Now that everyone's here, let's begin, shall we? Minato said, not hiding his excitement at seeing who was going to enter and who was going to drop out. After a few of the people he expected to enter did, he nodded, giving them his approval as they met the requirements. A few of the jonin decided not to enter, feeling that their teams didn't meet the standards that the exam called for. But finally, he got to the jonin of this year's group of genin. Minato-sensei, I want to enter Team 7 into this year's exams. Kakashi said, making Minato sigh as he knew that this would happen. I understand, Kakashi, but could you give me a reasoning as to why I should enter them? Just because they're my children doesn't mean that they're ready, said knowing that his children probably pestered Kakashi endlessly for him to enter them. I understand Minato-sensei, but I honestly do believe that they are ready. All of them have cage-level amounts of chakra, are already proficient in Tai and Enjutsu, and have completed 31D rank missions and 3C rank missions. Their teamwork is rusty, but they have improved greatly. Not to mention that they're strong individually. Because of that, they show the potential to become Shunin and pass the exam. Kakashi reported, a slightly condescending tone seeping into his voice as he eyed the other Jonin. I'll trust your judgment on this, Kakashi. I'll allow them to enter the exams, but have you told them of the dangers of it yet? At that question, Kakashi nervously shook his head in the negative, making Minato sigh. When he asked everyone else, they also repeated the act. But Minato and everyone else were surprised when Inko said that she told them. And even knowing the dangers, they agreed to enter. Snapping out of his stupor, Minato motioned the Jonin to continue their nominations. Hokage-sama teammate is ready to enter. They specialize in hunting and tracking, but even past that they show promise and potential to pass the exams. Shino and Ka have some difficulties getting along and Hinata doesn't really talk to them. So their teamwork suffers as a result. But when pushed they can become an efficient team and have shown that to me. They've completed 33D rank missions and 2C rank. While they lack experience, they make up for it in determination. At her concise report, Minato smiled and nodded, making Kurana give Kakashi a smug smile, making the latter's eye twitch. All right, if you believe that they can come together, then I'll allow them. But do tell them about the dangers. All right. At that, she nodded, and Guy stepped forward. Why, Hokage-sama, my youthful Jonin are more than ready to let their youth shine this year in the exam. Guy nearly shouted, making Minato laugh. Riley, yes, your genin have been together for about a year and a half, so they do meet the requirements. Guy, they're free to enter. Minato said, getting a nice guy pose from Guy in response. Hokage-sama Team 10 is ready. Though they really are slackers, they do have the potential as the next Inoshika Cho, and I've seen it on a few occasions. They've still got a long way to go. I have to bribe them in order for them to do anything really. But when push comes to shove, they do get things done. Shikamaru and Shoji share a close bond, though Ino hates working with them. But underneath all of that, they're more than capable of passing. They've finished 35D rank missions and 2C rank, so they've got some experience handling the harder stuff. Asuma reported, taking a breath after his report. Minato nodded, but then agreed. He knew that they would have some trouble, but from what he has seen in the reports, Shikamaru would be able to get them out of most situations given his intellect. All right, Asuma, I'll let them enter. Shikamaru should be able to keep them safe given his intelligence. And with them all working together, they should be safe. Minato said, smiling as Asuma gave him a grin in response. All right, Hokage-sama. I'm not going to lie here, but I really don't think that Team 11 is ready for the exams, but I want them to enter to see how far behind they really are. They're the most unbalanced team that I've seen. It's almost unfathomable. Sasaki has, if it's even possible, gotten even worse when it comes to interacting with his teammates. After his sister unlocked her sharing, he's been doing everything to try and force his awake. Sakura hasn't lost her fangirl attitude towards Sasuke, and because of that she hasn't really become any stronger than before. If anything, she's become a little bit weaker, not training in order to watch and cheer him on. Sai on the other hand still gives off the strange vibe from before. I don't know what's going on in his head and it's making me and Orochimaru-sama cautious. They've done 30D rank missions and 1C rank, but even after all of that, they've still not improved their teamwork. Genma reported, sighing heavily as some of the other Jonin gave him pitying looks. I understand Genma, while I would probably not allow them to enter, they do need to know that working alone doesn't make you a powerful ninja. I'll allow them to enter on the condition that you tell them about the dangers about what happens. If even one of them backs out, then they all aren't going to be able to enter. Minato said as Gen nodded in return. Finally, everyone's attention was on Anko. After the incident that happened a few weeks ago, she had stopped treating them as loving and familiar as she used to. While she did smile and chat with them, it wasn't with the same amount of energy that she used to show them. Now, they were curious about her response to the question at hand. Hokage-sama, I've told my team about the risks and dangers that the exams pose. Even after hearing them, they still agreed as a team that they would enter. At first, Yukumo and Satsuki lost the determination that they had. But once Naruto said that he would protect them no matter what, they regained it, and it was much stronger than before as well. They've completed 41D rank missions and won a rank mission. And even after all that, they're still humble and not at all. Their teamwork is out of this world, and individually, they're strong enough to take down Chunin-level opponents. I know that they're ready for the exam and that they'll pass it without any trouble at all. Enko reported confidence and pride brimming from her person as everyone looked on in awe. They have never seen Enko put such confidence in another person, let alone three. The confidence and way that she spoke of her genin led no room for doubt. They would be entering and they would go far, and Minato felt that as well. All right, Enko, I'll allow them to enter. If what you said is true, then I have no doubts that they will go far in this year's exam. Minato said, his voice held a little bit of pride after hearing what his son said to help his teammates regain their confidence. After everything was settled and all the teams that were going to enter handed in their forms, Minato dismissed everyone. As she was walking out, Enko was stopped by Kurana, who was with Asuma and Genma. Enko-chan, do you want to go grab a bite with us? Kurini asked, hopeful that she would agree to go with them. Behind, Genma and Asuma held the same hope that she did, but it was quickly gone once they heard her response. Nah, I'm fine, thanks though, Kurana. I'm meeting Mimochi and the guys, so I can't. Maybe next time though, she said as she made her way to her new usual meeting spot as the three behind her looked on with sad eyes. Kurina especially. Kamian, let's go. Asuma said, putting a hand on her shoulder as they left the tower. Time skip. A few days later, the day had finally come. Making his way to the building that the exams were held, Naruto heard the sounds of a dispute happening, and quickly made his way over to investigate. When he arrived, he saw a boy around his age dressing in a black bodysuit, wearing a black hood with pointed cat ear-like appendages that had a Suna headband attached to it. Strange objected, wrapped in bandages on his back with purple paint on his face. He was holding a boy younger than the both of them by the scruff of his neck as two other kids watched on in horror and fear. Watch where you're going, you little brat. The teen shouted at the boy being held up, started shaking. Oh, you going to cry now, Tisk. Who knew that there were such BRS in this village? I'll really make you cry. The teen said, his fist back as the younger boy closed his eyes. But before he could do anything, Naruto had appeared and gripped his wrist hard. Guwh, what the hell? The teen said, dropping the boy and focusing his attention on the blonde in front of him. Before anyone could say anything, the young boy and the two other kids behind the older boys immediately brightened up. Menma, they shouted, but it fell on deaf ears when the blonde that they thought was their honorary Enshin ignored them. What's Asuna Nin doing picking on a little kid? If you want to fight, pick on someone your own size. You sorry, waste of space, Naruto said in a chilling tone as he glared at the older boy, making the teen flinch before he glared back. As things were about to heat up, a voice broke through the tense atmosphere that had been created. Konohamaru, a series of voices called out, the group turning around and seeing Menma, Ka, and a few other boys running towards them. But next to them was a scowling Sash. After they had heard Konohamaru cry out, they immediately ran to the source. Even Sasaki followed, curious as to what was happening. But all three froze when they locked eyes with blank navy ones. Silence. That was what prevailed over the area. It even affected the teen as a bead of sweat dropped down his head. The odds not in his favor. But that vanished once the blonde holding his wrist let go. I don't have time to waste with you. Get out of my sight, he said in the same tone as before. Before the teen could retort, the blonde cut him off. And you two in the tree, I'm guessing that you're his teammates. You have better get out of my sight as well. At that, the teen froze, his eyes widening as a teen with blonde hair tied into 4 pigtails holding a large metal fan came out, and a boy with red hair and a gourd appeared in a swirl of sand. Gara, the teen stuttered out, making everyone focus attention on the redhead. Seemingly the cause of the teen's fear. Conqueror, you're a disgrace to our village. If you do that again, I'll kill you, the redhead said in a bloodthirsty voice, making everyone minus Nar flinch. Turning to Nar, he addressed him. My apologies. I am Gar of the Sand. What is your name? He asked in an emotionless tone. Nar was all that he got in response, making the redhead crack a small maniacal smile. Nar, mother will enjoy it when I spill your blood. He said in a crazed tone before he started walking away with the two, but was stopped when Sasaki called out to him. Hey, I'm Sasuke Uchiha of the Uchiha clan, he shouted, smirking, knowing that the group would be in awe of his status. I have no interest in any of you other than him, Gar said, pointing at Nar, anger seeping into the faces of the other boys. Soon they were out of sight, leaving the Konoha ninja alone. Before anyone could talk, Konohamaru instantly latched onto Menma crying about how scary the situation was. As the older boy tried to calm him down, he was about to say something else, but stopped when he saw his older brother start to leave. Hey, where do you think you're going, loser? he shouted, scaring the kids, known as Konohamaru, Udon, and Wa. However, his anger only increased when his brother ignored him, prompting him to run up and grab his shoulder, forcibly turning him around. Don't think that you're some kind of hero just because you did something like that. People like you shouldn't get their hopes up. Menma growled out as he glared at his older brother. His group of friends soon joined him. Yeah, dead last. Don't get ahead of yourself. You're lucky that we got here or else you would have been put into the ground. KBA barked out, also glaring at the older blonde. While things began to get tense, they got even more tense when Menma reached out to grab his older brother's collar, but was stopped and later shocked at what happened next. Nar grabbed Menma's wrist and twisted it, making him WSE in pain. But before he could do anything, he yanked his wrist to the side, making Menma lose his balance. In turn, Naruto forced him onto the ground, his arm locked behind his back. Shocked at what just happened, Ka was about to engage the older blonde for attacking his best friend when a chilling voice made him freeze. If you don't want to lose conciseness, then you'll stay there like a good dog, Naruto said, his voice sending shivers down the spines of everyone present. After, he applied more pressure onto Menma's arm, making the younger blonde wince and grunt in pain. I've had just about enough of your attitude, Menma. How long are you planning to keep this up? And tell you're a Chunin, Jonin, Anbu, because if you keep acting like you're superior to everyone else, you're going to end up having your squad dead because of you. At that, Menma's eyes went wide. I know you hate me. You detest me, despise me. But let me tell you a little secret, Menma. I don't care at those words. Menma and the rest of the people watching could only gape their mouths trying to form words, but none coming out. You can hate me all you want, but in the end it'll get you nowhere. And let me tell you something, Otudu. If I ever catch wind that you cause trouble because of your attitude, I'll make sure that it never happens again. Do you understand? When Menma didn't respond, Naruto tightened the lock on his arm, making him cry out a little in pain. Do you understand? Naruto said, his voice colder than ice. After that, Menma nodded his head submissively, letting of his arm. Naruto stood up and faced Ka and the others who flinched and shrunk in fear when they saw his cold eyes. Let me tell you all something, especially you and your mud Menma. The attitudes that you have now will get someone killed. I don't care how strong, smart, or brave you are. You will get someone killed if you keep acting that way. You had better fix that problem yourselves or I'll fix it for you. Finishing his lecture threat, Naruto continued towards the exam center, leaving behind a frightened group of shinobi. Scene change exam building. Standing in front of the building that would become the place where their hopes for the promotion to Chunin were held, Team 12 stood together, their backs straight and their eyes filled with determination. Exchanging glances with each other, they nodded as they mentally agreed with each other, entering the building together with the same thought running through their minds. Let's do this. So guys, what do you think about this Naruto story? Tell me your opinion in the comments. And if you want more Naruto what if stories, make sure to subscribe to Universe of Naruto. Thanks for watching.